Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The air was thick with mist, rolling through the trees like a breath from some ancient being. The forest seemed alive, its shadows stretching in the fading light. Winding trails led deeper into the woods, but there was no path more inviting than the one that turned to an old, forgotten lodge. The structure loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the dimming sky. Its weathered stone walls and crumbling wood framed the eerie silence that surrounded it. The lodge had been abandoned for years, maybe even decades, yet it stood like a watchful sentinel in the heart of the forest. Sasha pulled her coat tighter around her, her boots crunching on the frost-dusted ground. She had heard the stories about the place, but they were just that, stories. Her friends had dared her to come, to see for herself if the haunted lodge was truly as cursed as the old legends claimed. She never believed in ghosts, in the whispers of the forest, or the chilling promises of something lurking in the dark. But as she stepped closer, the chill in the air intensified, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The windows of the lodge were dark, empty, yet there was something strange about them. The forest was silent now, save for the rustling of leaves far off in the distance. A shiver crawled down her spine. Sasha hesitated at the threshold of the lodge, the old wooden door hanging slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. It beckoned her, and for a moment, it almost felt like the forest itself was urging her forward, like it had a secret to tell. Her friends had left her behind at the edge of the woods, daring her to enter the lodge alone. They had all laughed, their voices echoing in her mind, but there was no laughter now, only the whispering of wind through the trees. Taking a slow step forward, she brushed her fingers against the cold stone wall. Her hand recoiled as the rough texture seemed to pulse under her touch, sending a strange warmth up her arm as if the building was alive. But that didn't make sense, she thought, shaking her head. It was just an old house, full of decay and time-worn secrets. There was no need to be afraid. But as she stepped across the threshold, the atmosphere changed immediately. The air felt thicker, heavier, as though the house itself was pressing down on her. The smell of damp wood and mold filled her nostrils. She winced at the musty scent but pushed forward, her boots echoing against the dusty floors. Inside, the lodge looked exactly how she imagined it, stale and forgotten, with dark corners and the faintest glimmers of cobwebs that hung like broken dreams from the rafters. Moonlight filtered through the cracks in the wooden slats, casting eerie beams that touched forgotten furniture and long-abandoned paintings. Each step she took seemed to stir the air, yet there was no sound, no creak of floorboards, no flutter of dust. Just an unsettling stillness. But there was something else now, a sensation that crept along her skin. It was subtle at first, just the faintest feeling of being watched. She shook it off, her heartbeat quickening as she scanned the room. The walls were adorned with old portraits, their faces worn by time, but their eyes, those eyes, seemed too lifelike. They followed her, no matter where she moved. Sasha swallowed hard, her throat tight, and she forced herself to turn away from the paintings. The floorboards beneath her feet creaked as she walked deeper into the lodge, and she found herself in a large, open space. A sitting room, she assumed. A stone fireplace loomed to one side, cold and empty, but the very sight of it filled her with an odd sense of dread. A fire had once crackled here, warming those who gathered around, but now it was nothing more than a dark, hollow mouth in the wall. Her eyes lingered on the shadows. The dark seemed to cling to the far corners of the room like an entity all its own. Just then she heard it, the softest, most delicate sound. A whisper, barely audible, as if someone was speaking just outside her hearing. She froze. The voice was not her own. It wasn't even a voice she recognized. It was low, distant, but full of urgency. "Leave, now." Sasha's breath caught in her throat. The words echoed in her mind, reverberating through the empty room. Was it her imagination? Or had someone spoken? Someone who had been here long before her? She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she brought the device to her ear. But the screen remained black. No signal. Of course. In that moment, the unease she had been pushing away rose up, a tide of cold panic that gripped her chest. She wasn't alone. She could feel it now, something watching from the dark corners. Something ancient, something forgotten. The lodge seemed to hold its breath as she stood there, paralyzed by an unseen presence. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Come closer." It was so faint, so soft that she wasn't sure if she imagined it, but something about the sound called to her. She took a shaky step toward the far corner of the room, where shadows pooled like ink in water. As she neared, the temperature dropped. Her breath became visible in the air, and she realized there was a door, almost hidden behind a thick curtain of dust and cobwebs. Without thinking, she reached for the handle. The handle was cold to the touch, as if the very metal had been frozen by time itself. Sasha's fingers gripped it, and for a moment she hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, to leave the lodge before whatever presence lurked here could make itself known. But curiosity, dark, magnetic, pulled her closer. She couldn't explain it, but something about this place, this forgotten corner of the world, called to her in a way she couldn't resist. With a slow, deliberate turn, the door creaked open, sending a shiver down her spine. The air that poured from the room beyond felt ancient, thick with dust and the weight of untold secrets. For a moment, Sasha stood frozen in place, the faint whispering of the wind outside the only sound in the stillness. Then she stepped inside. The room was smaller than the grand sitting room she had just left, but it was no less eerie. The walls were lined with shelves, but most of the books had long since crumbled to dust, leaving behind only empty, gaping spaces. The floor was covered in a layer of dust so thick it almost looked like snow. There was a musty smell, tinged with the scent of old paper and rotting wood. Yet there was something else here, a strange, pungent aroma that clung to the air, like the remnants of something that had been alive long ago. Something had been kept in this room. Something old. Something that didn't belong to the lodge. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for any clues, any explanation. And then she saw it. In the far corner of the room, obscured by a heavy velvet curtain that hung from the ceiling, was a large wooden chest. Its surface was covered in dark stains, as though something had leaked from it long ago and never fully dried. The chest was old, older than anything in the room, but it was the shape of it that made her blood run cold. It was not just an ordinary chest. There was something about it that felt wrong. The edges were too sharp, too precise, as though the wood had been carved from something far darker than the surrounding furnishings. A voice echoed in her mind once more, louder this time. "Open it." Sasha stepped closer to the chest, every instinct telling her to stop, to run, to forget all of this and never look back. But she couldn't. She was drawn to it, compelled like a moth to a flame. With a trembling hand, she reached for the latch. The metal felt warm under her fingers, pulsing, alive. It clicked open with a sound far too loud for the silent room, and Sasha's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the chest, her breath shallow as she slowly lifted the heavy lid. What she saw inside made her heart lurch in her chest. At first it seemed empty, just a shallow, dark interior. But then her eyes adjusted to the dim light and she saw something else. A bundle, wrapped tightly in black cloth, sitting at the bottom of the chest. She reached out, her fingers brushing the fabric, and the moment she touched it, a jolt of electricity shot up her arm. She gasped, pulling back, but the sensation lingered, prickling against her skin. The bundle seemed to tremble in her hands as she carefully unwrapped it, her breath hitching. Inside was a book, old, bound in weathered leather, with a cover that seemed almost too smooth for its age. The edges of the pages were yellowed, curling slightly, and the symbols on the front were unfamiliar, twisted and strange. It wasn't a language she recognized, but the characters seemed to pulse on the page, shifting as though they were alive. Sasha opened the book to the first page, her hands shaking. The words blurred before her eyes, but there was something in them that pulled at her. A promise, a warning, something that spoke to her very soul. It was a story, a tale of a place like this lodge, a place cursed by time and blood, where shadows roamed free and the forgotten were never truly gone. The text was written in a language that didn't exist in any human tongue, but somehow she could understand it. The more she read, the deeper the dread sank into her chest, like something was clawing at her from inside the lodge. The last line of the page stopped her breath completely. They will come for you once the book is opened. It has already begun. A cold gust of wind swept through the room, slamming the door shut with a force that nearly knocked Sasha off her feet. The book flew from her hands, landing with a thud on the floor, its pages flipping wildly. Her heart pounded in her chest as she backed away, but the shadows in the room seemed to shift, swirling like smoke in the corners. The whispering began again, louder this time, almost a chant, an ancient, guttural sound that seemed to come from the very walls. She wasn't alone anymore. The floorboards groaned, and the air grew thick with an oppressive weight, as though something unseen was crawling closer, inch by inch. Sasha reached for the door, her breath shallow, but it was stuck. It wouldn't budge. The whispering rose to a maddening crescendo. Then she heard it. The sound of footsteps. Slow, measured, heavy. They were coming. Sasha's breath quickened as the footsteps grew louder, each one resonating with a hollow thud that vibrated through the very bones of the lodge. Her heart hammered in her chest, and for a moment, the world around her felt like it was closing in. The shadows shifted again, moving in strange patterns as if something, or someone, was twisting through them just out of sight. She tried the door again, her hands shaking as she gripped the cold handle with all her strength. There was no use. The door remained as solid and unyielding as the walls surrounding her. Panic began to claw at the edges of her mind, but she couldn't let it take over. She had to think. She had to get out. The footsteps grew louder still, now accompanied by a faint, raspy breathing that seemed to come from the very air itself. It felt as though the lodge had drawn a deep, slow breath, readying itself to exhale whatever nightmare it had been keeping inside. With no other option, Sasha turned back to the room, her eyes darting desperately around for anything she could use to defend herself, though she knew deep down that there was nothing here that could help her. The lodge was a living, breathing thing, an entity that had seen centuries pass and knew every shadow, every creaking board. It knew her even if she didn't know it. As the footsteps approached, she caught sight of something in the farthest corner of the room, hidden behind the thick curtains of dust and cobwebs. There was a figure, crouched in the corner, its outline barely visible against the darkness. She froze, her pulse quickening again. It wasn't a person, it couldn't be. But something about the way it hunched there, unmoving, staring out into the room, made her insides twist with dread. She couldn't look away. The figure's form was unnatural, its limbs too long, too thin. It shifted, the movement slow and deliberate, almost as though it were a part of the shadows themselves. The breathing she had heard earlier grew louder now, coming from the figure, its chest rising and falling in slow, rhythmic intervals. Sasha took a cautious step backward, but as soon as her foot touched the floor, the sound of the footsteps stopped. An eerie silence fell over the room, thick and oppressive, like the calm before a storm. The figure's head slowly turned, its gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her blood freeze. Its eyes were dark, empty, hollow pits that seemed to draw in the very light around them. The shadows shifted again, and the figure's lips parted slightly, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too jagged to be human. The air grew colder still, and she could feel her breath forming small, visible clouds in front of her. But she couldn't look away. It was as if the figure was pulling her in, ensnaring her with its gaze, with its presence. A low, guttural growl emanated from the figure's throat, the sound echoing in the stillness like the growl of some ancient beast long forgotten. Suddenly the figure moved, fast, too fast. It shot forward with a blur of motion, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it closed the distance between them in an instant. Sasha's scream caught in her throat as she stumbled backward, her foot slipping on the dusty floor. Before she could react, the room seemed to shift. The shadows deepened, swallowing the corners of the room until all she could see was the figure's silhouette, its long fingers stretching toward her. The air was thick with a presence, oppressive and ancient, like the very walls of the lodge were closing in. The figure spoke then, its voice low and gravelly, rasping from deep within its throat. "You should not have opened the door." Sasha's breath caught in her throat. The voice was familiar in some way, but she couldn't place it. It was as if she had heard it before, maybe in a dream, maybe in a distant memory long buried. She shook her head, backing away, but the figure was relentless, moving closer with each step. Its presence filled the room, overpowering her senses, until there was no room to breathe, no room to think. "Leave, now," the figure hissed, and its eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, seemed to pull her in, sucking the very life from her. Sasha's mind raced, and in that moment of terror, she felt a flicker of clarity. The book she had found, the words in its pages. They will come for you once the book is opened. The chest, the whispering, it was all connected. But what did it want from her? Why her? The figure didn't wait for her to find the answer. It lunged, its limbs stretching like gnarled branches reaching out to claim her. The room went dark, consumed by the shadows, and for a split second, all she could see were those eyes, those endless, abyssal pits. A cold hand gripped her arm, icy and unyielding. Then, nothing. Sasha gasped as the darkness swallowed her whole, her mind reeling, her body frozen in place. The coldness of the hand that gripped her arm spread through her like ice, creeping up her skin, numbing her senses. It wasn't a simple touch. No, this was something much darker, something that reached deep into her very soul, as if it were trying to pull her apart. Her vision blurred, the edges of her sight bending and warping, the shadows swirling around her like living things. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. It was as though the very air had been stolen from her lungs. The oppressive silence was suffocating, and she was left alone with the crushing weight of the presence that loomed over her. The figure's grip tightened, its cold fingers digging into her flesh, and for a moment, it felt as though the lodge itself was alive, its pulse beating in time with her own erratic heart. She could feel the very walls trembling, the air humming with an ancient energy, an energy that had lain dormant for centuries, waiting for someone to awaken it. The whispering came again, but it wasn't just a single voice anymore. No, this time it was a chorus, 100 voices, all speaking in a language Sasha couldn't understand. They swirled around her like a storm, their words pulling at her mind, pressing in on her thoughts. She tried to block them out, but it was impossible. The voices were too powerful, too insistent. Each one seemed to carry a fragment of something dark, something wrong. Then, through the sea of voices, one stood out. A voice that wasn't like the others. It was calm, almost soothing, and yet it held an undeniable sense of dread. You cannot leave. You are already part of the lodge. The words echoed in her mind, their meaning seeping into her like poison. She wasn't sure if they were spoken aloud or if they were just thoughts, her thoughts, but the effect was the same. It felt as though the lodge had been waiting for her, had been watching her for far longer than she realized. Her thoughts flickered back to the book, the strange leather-bound tome that had brought her here. Had it known this would happen? Was the book some kind of key, a catalyst to awaken whatever cursed force had been sleeping in the heart of the lodge? She struggled, but the grip on her arm was unyielding. Desperation clawed at her chest, but she couldn't break free. Her surroundings were fading, the edges of her vision darkening, and she was being pulled toward the figure, pulled into the very heart of the lodge's mystery. She could feel the air grow colder still, the temperature plummeting until it felt like the very marrow in her bones was freezing. Then, without warning, the pressure eased. The figure's grip released her arm, and she stumbled backward, gasping for air. The shadows seemed to recede, pulling back into the corners of the room. The oppressive weight lifted, and the whispers fell silent, leaving behind only the sound of her labored breathing. She blinked, disoriented, her mind struggling to catch up with the sudden shift. For a moment she thought it was over. She was free. She could leave. But the sense of wrongness lingered, still hanging heavy in the air. Sasha took a shaky step forward, her pulse still racing. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. The figure was gone, vanished into the shadows from whence it came, but its presence remained like an indelible mark on the air itself. She noticed then that the book had moved. The leather-bound tome lay open on the floor, its pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen wind. But that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the writing. The characters on the pages had changed. Before, they had been twisted and foreign, an unreadable jumble of symbols. Now the text had settled into a new shape, one that she could comprehend. The letters, though strange, were clear enough to make out. It is too late. You have awakened us. Sasha's heart skipped a beat, and the air around her grew unbearably still. It was as if the world itself had stopped turning. The lodge seemed to be holding its breath. With trembling hands, she reached down and gently closed the book, the leather cool under her fingers. She had to leave. No, she couldn't stay here any longer. Whatever had been awakened, whatever force had been lurking in the shadows of the lodge, it was no longer dormant. She could feel it in her bones. She turned toward the door, but before she could take a step, a sound stopped her. A low, guttural growl. It rumbled through the floor beneath her feet, sending a ripple of fear through her body. The growl echoed through the room as if coming from deep within the lodge itself. Sasha froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew now that she wasn't alone, and whatever had been waiting, whatever had been awakened, was coming for her. The shadows shifted again, this time moving with purpose, crawling toward her like a living thing. The air grew thick once more, suffocating in its intensity. She could hear the scrape of claws on wood, the soft shuffle of feet, but it wasn't just one presence. There were more now, dozens, a swarm of unseen entities closing in from every corner of the room. Sasha's breath hitched, and she spun around, her mind racing, looking for an escape, any way out. She had to leave. She had to escape the lodge before it was too late. But the shadows closed in around her, and the growl grew louder, more menacing. And then a voice. You are the key. You will not leave. Sasha's legs trembled beneath her as the voice echoed through the lodge, resonating in the very walls. The shadows closed in, shifting and writhing like tendrils of darkness, creeping toward her, surrounding her on all sides. The growls grew louder, more distinct, no longer just distant sounds, but deep and menacing, as if something was prowling just beyond her sight. She tried to move, to run, but the air was thick, heavy with an unseen pressure, as though the lodge itself was holding her in place, anchoring her to the floor. Her limbs felt like lead, as though the weight of the ancient building was pressing down on her, trapping her in its suffocating grip. The chill in the air was unbearable now, an icy tendril that wrapped around her throat, constricting with every breath. The shadows flickered, and for a moment Sasha saw something, a shape, a form, emerging from the darkness. It was tall, hunched, with limbs that stretched unnaturally long, fingers tipped with claws that scraped against the floor as it moved. Its body was a mass of shadows, shifting and swirling, its face hidden in the blackness of the room. But its eyes were unmistakable. They burned with an otherworldly glow, pulsing like embers in the dark. The growling grew louder as the figure inched closer, its movements jerky, almost unnatural, as though it wasn't entirely part of this world. It was the same figure, the keeper, the one who had haunted the edges of the room, waiting for her to open the door. It wasn't alone anymore. Behind it, a dozen more figures emerged from the shadows, all twisted and distorted, all eyes burning with that same cold, malevolent light. Sasha's breath caught in her throat, and the world around her began to close in, the walls narrowing as if the room itself was shrinking. The keeper's voice rumbled through the silence, low and guttural, its tone filled with an eerie certainty. You have opened the door to what was sealed long ago. Now you are part of us. You are bound to this place just as we are. There is no escape. The words settled into her bones, and a chill spread through her chest. She felt the weight of their truth, the unyielding force of it pressing against her from all sides. She was trapped. She had unleashed something that had been waiting here for centuries, something that had been locked away for a reason. But Sasha didn't want to accept it. She couldn't. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to fight back, to escape this place. Her mind raced, searching for an answer, but all she could think of was the book, the dark tome she had found in the chest. The words in it, the cryptic warnings. They will come for you once the book is opened. What did it mean? Was it too late to undo what she had done? The keeper's voice broke through her thoughts, its tone dripping with malice. There is no undoing. Once the door is opened, it cannot be closed. Once you enter, you belong to us. Sasha's eyes darted to the book, still lying open on the floor, its pages flickering as if alive, the text shifting and twisting with every passing moment. Her eyes locked on a phrase that stood out, one she hadn't noticed before, a line that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. To free yourself, you must bind your soul to the lodge. But beware, for it will take what it wants in return. Her breath caught in her throat. What did that mean? Bind her soul? The lodge? No, she couldn't. She wouldn't. But the shadows were closing in again. The keeper and its minions were getting closer, their glowing eyes fixed on her with an insatiable hunger. She could feel the pull now, like invisible chains tightening around her body, tugging her toward the dark corner of the room. She could hear their whispers, low and seductive, promises of power, of freedom. If only she would submit, if only she would accept the binding. Her mind screamed at her to fight back, to do anything, but she was too weak. The cold had seeped into her bones, and the air felt thick with an ancient presence, one that had existed long before she ever stepped foot in this cursed place. But then a thought, a spark, flickered through her mind. The lantern. The lantern she had seen when she first entered the lodge, hanging above the fireplace, its light flickering weakly in the dark. It had been dim, but there had been something about it, something wrong, as if it had been waiting, watching. Could it be the key? Could it be the way to stop this? She took a deep breath, steadying herself, trying to shake off the fear that was threatening to swallow her whole. She didn't have much time. The keeper's growl was growing louder, and the others were moving toward her. With all the strength she could muster, she forced herself to turn, to break free of the invisible chains that seemed to bind her to the shadows. She stumbled toward the fireplace, her legs shaking, but she pushed on, driven by the single thought of the lantern. The keeper's hiss echoed in her ears, growing louder with every step, but she didn't stop. The lantern was within reach now, hanging just above the mantel. The flame flickered, weak and unstable, but still there, casting a faint, eerie light. Sasha reached up, her fingers trembling as she grasped the lantern. The moment her hand touched it, the temperature in the room plummeted. The shadows recoiled, pulling back as if they were afraid of the light. The keeper's roar echoed in the lodge, louder than before, but it sounded distant now, muffled, as if the walls themselves were pushing it away. The lantern's flame burned brighter in her hands, its light expanding outward, filling the room with an unearthly glow. The figures in the shadows shrieked, their forms flickering and dissolving in the light, their twisted shapes distorting and warping. The keeper's voice, once so confident, now faltered, fear creeping into its tone. "You cannot stop what has begun." But Sasha didn't listen. She held the lantern high, its light cutting through the darkness, its flame now blazing like a beacon. The shadows recoiled further, their forms dissolving into wisps of smoke. The keeper's growl turned into a wail, a howl of desperation, but it was too late. The light was driving them back. But as they retreated, Sasha realized the lodge was not just a house. It was alive. And the light was only temporary. The light from the lantern bathed the room in an ethereal glow, pushing the shadows back into the recesses of the lodge, where they twisted and recoiled like wounded animals. The keeper's wail echoed in the air, its once imposing presence now reduced to a hollow cry, as if the very fabric of the lodge was unraveling before her eyes. Yet, despite the retreating darkness, something in the air had changed. The lodge no longer felt like a mere building. It felt alive, like a creature with a heart that pulsed in rhythm with her own. Sasha held the lantern higher, the flames flaring and casting dancing shadows on the walls. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but there was no time to pause. She knew that whatever was happening, whatever force had been awakened in this place, was far from finished. The keeper had retreated for now, but the ancient evil that lived in these walls was still here, lurking just out of sight, biding its time. A low rumble vibrated through the floor beneath her feet, like the deep growl of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Sasha could feel the tremors beneath her toes, the pulsing rhythm of the lodge's heartbeat, reverberating through the very ground. It was alive. She was the key, just as the book had said. She had opened the door, and now she was bound to it. The shadows were not gone, they were simply waiting, watching. Sasha took a step back, the lantern flickering, the flame casting a wide arc of light. She turned to face the far side of the room, where the walls seemed to stretch higher and higher into the dark void above. The air was thick now, more oppressive than ever before, and her skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. She wasn't alone. There was something here, something deep within the bowels of the lodge, that hadn't yet revealed itself. A sound echoed in the distance, a soft creak of wood, followed by a faint scratching, like claws dragging across the floor. Then a whisper. The whisper of a voice she hadn't heard before. It was distant but clear. "Come closer. It's waiting for you." The voice seemed to come from every corner of the room, from the very walls themselves. It wasn't human. It wasn't even close. It was raw. The sound of it scraped against her ears like nails on a chalkboard, setting her teeth on edge. She wanted to ignore it, to turn and run, but her legs refused to move. The lodge had its hold on her now, its grip tightening with every passing second. The light from the lantern flickered again, threatening to go out. She could feel the pull of the darkness, the way it beckoned her with an almost hypnotic allure. The walls seemed to shift around her, stretching and bending, warping the very space she stood in. The room was no longer just a room, it was a labyrinth, a maze of shadows and light. And at the center of it there was something waiting. With a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, Sasha realized where the voice was coming from. It was coming from beneath the floor. She dropped to her knees, pressing her ear to the cold, splintered boards. The scratching, the low growls, it was all coming from below, from deep within the lodge's foundation. The very ground beneath her felt like it was breathing, like something was alive under there, something old, something ancient. Before she could fully comprehend what she was hearing, a sharp, violent crack reverberated through the floor, and the ground beneath her buckled. Sasha cried out, but it was too late. The floor splintered, and she fell through the widening gap, the lantern flying from her hand as the world around her went black. Sasha hit the ground hard, her body slamming into something soft and wet. She groaned, her vision swimming as she tried to push herself up. The air was thick with moisture, cold and damp. She blinked, struggling to focus, and when her eyes finally adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that made her heart drop into her stomach. She was no longer in the lodge. She was underground. The walls around her were made of stone, slick with moisture, and the air smelled of earth and decay. The faintest flickers of light illuminated the space, coming from strange, glowing veins running along the stone walls. The glow wasn't natural, it was an eerie, sickly green, pulsating in rhythmic waves as though the very stones were alive. But it wasn't just the walls that were alive. The floor beneath her shifted, like something was moving beneath the surface just out of sight. A low rumbling sound echoed through the chamber, vibrating through the stones, as though the ground itself was waking up. Sasha scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced around, searching for any sign of escape, but there was none. The chamber was vast, stretching out in all directions, the stone walls curving inward like the belly of some giant creature. The air was thick with the stench of rot, and the walls seemed to pulse, as if the very heart of the earth was beating beneath her. Suddenly, the voice returned, louder this time, echoing in her mind. "You are here, at the center. Welcome home." Sasha's blood ran cold as the voice wrapped around her, like tendrils of darkness sinking into her mind. It was the lodge, it was alive, and it was speaking to her. She felt its presence, its hunger deep within the stone, reaching out for her. The floor trembled again, and Sasha's gaze snapped down to the ground, where the stones were shifting, moving in patterns, forming shapes. Figures. Shadowy figures began to emerge from the stone itself, their bodies coalescing from the dark, each one twisted and contorted. Their forms were half human, half something else, something that defied nature. Their eyes gleamed with that same eerie green glow, and their mouths hung open, dripping with something that looked like dark, viscous liquid. Sasha stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat, her heart racing in her chest. "You will never leave. You are bound to this place now, just as we are. This is your home. Welcome to the heart of the lodge." The figures began to move toward her, their grotesque forms shuffling across the stone floor. Sasha's pulse quickened as they closed in, the stench of decay filling the air. Her thoughts screamed at her to run, to escape, but the shadows were everywhere now, filling the space, reaching for her. She was trapped. There was no escape. And as the first of the figures reached out to grab her, she felt a sharp pain at the back of her neck, like 1,000 needles pricking her skin. The lodge had claimed her. The figure's hand brushed against her skin, its touch cold and jagged, like the bite of ice against her flesh. Sasha flinched, but she couldn't pull away. Her body felt heavy, anchored in place by an unseen force. The shadows continued to crawl toward her, the air growing thicker with every passing second, as if the walls themselves were squeezing in on her. The figure's grip tightened around her wrist, its long, spindly fingers digging into her skin. She gasped, trying to break free, but her body felt frozen, as though the very essence of her being was being drawn into the stone beneath her feet. The figures around her closed in, their twisted, half-formed bodies moving with an eerie synchronicity, their eyes burning with that sickly green glow. They were speaking now, whispers that slithered into her mind, words she couldn't quite understand, but the meaning of them was unmistakable. "You are ours. The heart of the lodge is yours now, as it is ours." Sasha's breath caught in her throat as a wave of cold flooded through her. It wasn't just the air. The darkness itself felt alive, crawling beneath her skin, making her feel like she was being devoured from the inside out. She could feel it now, the pulsing rhythm of the lodge's heartbeat, echoing in her chest, in her veins. It was part of her, and she was part of it. The grip on her wrist tightened once more, and she cried out in pain, her mind racing for a way out. There had to be something, anything. The light from the lantern, maybe, or the book. She thought of the words she had read in the tome, the cryptic warning that had made her blood run cold. To free yourself, you must bind your soul to the lodge. But beware, for it will take what it wants in return. Her gaze snapped to the stone walls, her eyes frantic as they searched for something, anything that could help her. The glowing veins in the walls pulsed with a sickening rhythm, each pulse syncing with her own heartbeat. The very ground seemed to hum beneath her feet, the lodge itself trembling with anticipation. "There is no escape," the figure hissed in her ear, its breath cold and rancid. "You belong to the lodge now. You always have." Sasha shook her head violently, her body racked with fear and confusion. She refused to believe it. She couldn't be trapped here forever, bound to this cursed place, its shadows feeding on her very soul. There had to be a way to fight back. She had felt the power of the lantern, the way it pushed the shadows back, how it had made the keeper retreat. Could it do the same now? Could the light drive these creatures back too? Her hand shot to the ground, her fingers searching frantically for the lantern. Her heart pounded as the shadows crept closer, but the moment her fingers brushed against the cold metal of the lantern, a sudden surge of energy shot through her body. The light flared to life, brighter than ever before, its flame roaring in her hand. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering and twisting as if the light was burning them. They hissed, their grotesque faces twisting in agony as they shrank back from the lantern's glow. For a brief moment, the chamber seemed to crackle with power, the walls vibrating with the force of the light. The figures were losing their grip on her. They were afraid. But it wasn't enough. As she tried to stand, the ground beneath her trembled once more. The rumbling in the earth grew louder, the pulsing of the lodge's heartbeat intensifying. The stone beneath her feet cracked open, and from the gap emerged something far worse than the figures. It was the heart of the lodge. The heart was a mass of living, pulsing flesh, dark and twisted, like an organ ripped from the body of some ancient, godless creature. It was vast, filling the entire chamber, and it throbbed with an unnatural rhythm, each beat sending a tremor through the ground. Vines, thick and black, snaked out from the heart, their tips sharp like thorns, reaching toward her with deadly intent. The heart's surface was slick with dark, viscous fluid, and as it moved, the air thickened with the stench of rot. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her, filling her mind with their maddening chorus. "Join us," they hissed, "the heart is yours to command." The keeper's voice joined in, its tone mocking. "You will become like us. You will feed on the light and the darkness alike. You are ours now and forever." Sasha staggered back, the lantern's light flickering in her hand as she struggled to keep it raised. The darkness pressed in on all sides, suffocating her, smothering her in its weight. The heart pulsed again, and the floor cracked wider, swallowing more of the stone as the black vines stretched closer, wrapping around her legs. Panic surged through her, but then, something within her snapped. She refused to give in. She wouldn't let the lodge consume her. She couldn't. Her eyes locked onto the heart, and for a fleeting moment she felt something stir within her, a flicker of power, of control. The lantern flared brightly in her hand, its light growing stronger, almost blinding. The shadows recoiled further, but the heart, the true heart, remained unfazed, its dark pulse steady, relentless. But there was something there, a weakness. A flicker in its rhythm, a pattern that didn't quite fit. It was tied to the lodge, bound by the same pulse that had twisted the entire place into this monstrous entity, but it wasn't invincible. "I have to act now," Sasha thought, her mind racing, her pulse matching the thrum of the heart. She stepped forward, the lantern trembling in her hands, but her resolve was clear. She had to get closer, she had to reach the heart, and, without warning, the vines lunged at her, sharp and vicious, wrapping around her waist, her arms, pulling her toward the heart's mass. Her body was jerked violently, but she clung to the lantern, the light now blazing like a star in the darkness. The heart recoiled, its pulsing slowing as the light from the lantern burned brighter. The air crackled with power, and the vines began to writhe, their grip weakening. Sasha's heart beat in time with the thrum of the heart, but now she was the one in control. The heart, vast and monstrous, pulsed beneath Sasha's feet as though it were alive, an ancient, bloodthirsty thing waiting to devour her. She could feel the tremors in the ground, like the rumble of an earthquake, vibrating deep into her bones. The vines wrapped tighter around her, their thorny tendrils digging into her flesh, sharp as razors. The more she struggled, the tighter they became, and for a moment, the weight of fear threatened to drown her. But then, as the light from the lantern flared brighter, something deep inside her surged to life. It wasn't just the lantern that was burning, she was burning. Her soul, her very essence, seemed to ignite with a fiery resolve, a newfound strength that coursed through her veins like molten metal. The darkness around her roiled, recoiling, as if it were repelled by the very force she now embodied. The heart, that living, pulsing mass, seemed to feel it. It writhed in agony, its dark surface cracking, the black veins that ran through it throbbing in time with the beating of her heart. The vines that held her began to falter, their grip loosening as she held the lantern higher, the flame now blazing with such intensity that it threatened to scorch the air itself. For a moment it seemed like time stopped. The whispers, once a constant hum in the air, fell silent. The growls of the creatures surrounding her ceased, and even the rumbling of the lodge seemed to still. The entire space, once alive with movement and chaos, now stood at the precipice of something far worse, a confrontation between the heart of the lodge and the force that had awakened her. And then, without warning, the heart screamed. It was a sound unlike anything Sasha had ever heard before. It was the scream of something ancient, a sound so filled with agony and rage that it vibrated through her chest, shaking the very ground beneath her. The air turned cold, freezing her to the core, and for a split second, the lantern's flame flickered, nearly extinguishing. But Sasha wasn't afraid anymore. The darkness, the evil that lived in the heart of the lodge, was no longer an immovable force. It was just another thing that could be defeated. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let go of the lantern, her hands now blistered from the intense heat, her body trembling, but her resolve unwavering. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but with each exhale, the flame grew brighter. The vines writhed and the heart groaned, its pulse now erratic, panicked. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in, the stone vibrating with the sheer force of the lodge's anger. The creatures around her, those twisted figures that had once been drawn to her, now howled in pain, their forms flickering and fading as though they couldn't survive in the face of the light she commanded. The keeper's voice rose from the depths, distorted and filled with wrath. "You cannot banish us. You cannot destroy the heart," it bellowed, its voice like the growl of a storm, crashing and thunderous. "You are nothing. You are ours." Sasha's pulse quickened, but she stood firm. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everything the lodge had taken. The souls it had devoured, the lives it had consumed, the darkness it had cast over this place for centuries. She wasn't going to let it claim her. She wouldn't let it claim anyone else. With a fierce cry, she pushed the lantern forward, holding it high above her head. The light flared again, blindingly bright, and for a moment, it felt as though the very essence of the lodge was being burned away, piece by piece. The vines recoiled, thrashing violently, their black tendrils snapping like whips in the air. The heart, the twisted, throbbing mass at the center of it all, let out another scream, this time a sound of terror as if it understood what was coming. The ground cracked open beneath her, and Sasha stumbled backward, barely catching herself as the earth trembled violently. The heart's pulse was becoming erratic, its rhythmic beating now panicked, disjointed. The darkness that had once enveloped her was now unraveling, retreating, fading in the light. The figures, those twisted souls that had once surrounded her, were vanishing into nothingness, their forms dissipating like smoke in the wind, leaving behind only the hollow, echoing whispers of their departure. They were gone, but the heart remained. The true force at the center of the lodge, the thing that had tied them all together, still pulsed in the darkness. Sasha's heart raced in her chest as she focused all of her energy on the lantern. She could feel it now, the struggle between the light and the darkness, as though the very essence of the lodge was alive, fighting back. The air grew thick again, oppressive, as though the stones were closing in on her, crushing her beneath their weight. But she refused to yield. She had to end this. The whispers came again, but this time they were softer, fainter. They were no longer a force that could take her. Now they were just echoes of what had once been. The heart's whispers. "You will never escape," they hissed. "This is where you belong. Where we all belong." But Sasha didn't listen. She shut her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. She thought of the lantern. She thought of the light. She thought of everything she had fought for, everything that was at stake. Her mind cleared, and in that moment of pure clarity, she understood. The heart was not just an entity. It was a parasite. It fed off fear. It fed off the dark. But it could not survive in the light. Not the pure light. She lifted the lantern higher, the light from the flame growing brighter, almost blinding. The ground beneath her feet began to crack and break apart, as though the very foundation of the lodge was shattering, and the heart, the core of the lodge, began to writhe and scream in terror. Then, with a force that shook the very stones around her, the heart exploded. A burst of blinding light erupted from it, so pure and so fierce that the darkness could no longer exist. The lodge itself seemed to scream, its ancient bones shattering, its foundations breaking apart, the very fabric of its being torn asunder. Sasha stood there, the lantern in her hands, its light still burning strong as the walls around her crumbled away, the darkness lifting, the oppressive weight vanishing into the ether. The lodge was dying. But as the last remnants of its power faded, a single figure remained. The keeper. It stood before her, its form flickering, no longer solid, but its eyes, those burning eyes, locked onto hers with a mix of fury and desperation. The keeper's voice rasped one final time, its tone filled with venom. "You think you have won, but the heart will return." With those final words, the keeper dissolved into the light, its form vanishing like smoke in the wind. The last remnants of the lodge crumbled around her, and the light from the lantern flared one final time. And then silence. The light from the lantern dimmed slowly, flickering one last time before settling into a soft, steady glow. The room around Sasha was empty, empty in a way that made the silence deafening. No whispers echoed through the air. No rumbling tremors shook the ground beneath her feet. The crushing weight of the lodge's presence had vanished, leaving only an eerie calm in its wake. Sasha stood motionless, the lantern clutched in her trembling hands, its light casting long shadows on the crumbling walls. The air, once thick with dread, was now still, cool and quiet, as if the very earth beneath her had taken a collective breath and released it all at once. The oppressive darkness that had filled every corner of the lodge was gone, replaced by the faint, cleansing light that now bathed the space. She looked around, but the room that had been her prison just moments ago had changed. The stone walls, once alive with the pulse of the heart, were now cracked and fractured, their surfaces slick with moisture that seemed to shimmer in the lantern's glow. The floor, which had once been solid and unforgiving, was now covered with deep fissures, as if the foundation itself had been torn apart. The lodge was dying. But Sasha didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel relief. Instead, a deep, gnawing emptiness settled into her chest. She had destroyed the heart, yes. She had banished the darkness and the creatures that had haunted her, but something in her heart told her that it wasn't truly over. The feeling of being watched never fully left her, like the lodge itself was still lingering even in its death throes. She took a hesitant step forward, her boots crunching on the stone floor as she moved toward the remnants of the heart, which now lay scattered like shattered glass, dark and oily against the cracked stone. The broken pieces pulsed faintly, still glowing with that sickly green hue, but they were fading. The essence that had once sustained them was gone. But the whispers, those whispers, were still there beneath the silence, as if they were just waiting for her to listen again. A faint, low murmur that rose from the cracks in the ground, a voice that echoed in her mind. "You think you've won?" Sasha's breath caught in her throat. She spun around, clutching the lantern tighter, its light brightening in a flash of instinctual fear. But the shadows were no longer a threat. They were weak, fading, nothing like the oppressive force they had once been. The room was empty of them. Yet, something lingered in the air, as if the lodge's essence hadn't quite faded away, as though it still had a lingering claim on this place. On her. She walked cautiously through the chamber, the ground beneath her feet crumbling and falling away with every step. The stone was no longer solid, but instead, it seemed to pulse and crack, like the very foundations of the lodge were being pulled apart from the inside. There was no sound, no growling, no hissing, no voices anymore. It was as if the world had gone mute, and she was left alone with the cold emptiness of the place. But then a noise. It was faint at first, a soft scraping sound like something dragging across stone. Sasha froze, her hand tightening around the lantern as she turned slowly in the direction of the sound. Her heart raced, her pulse quickening as the scraping grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from deep within the walls, from the very core of the lodge. The darkness seemed to shift, pulling in on itself once more. She could feel it like a pressure in the air, a weight that was pressing against her from all directions. Her eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for any sign of movement, but there was nothing until a sudden jolt beneath her feet. Sasha staggered, barely keeping her balance as the ground beneath her cracked open with a deafening snap. The stone floor buckled and split, sending fragments of rock flying through the air. She instinctively raised the lantern higher, its light illuminating the widening fissure in the ground. And then, from deep within the earth, something stirred. The ground trembled once more, and the broken pieces of the heart, those shattered remnants of the ancient darkness, began to shift, to reform. Sasha's blood ran cold. The heart, in its final moments, was not dead. It was regenerating. Slowly, deliberately, the pieces of the lodge's dark core began to pull themselves back together, the oily black mass growing, coalescing in the center of the chamber. The green glow returned, faint at first, but growing brighter with every passing second. The pulsing rhythm began again, slow and steady, as if the heart of the lodge was breathing. Sasha backed away, her mind reeling. She had destroyed the heart. She had ended it. Hadn't she? But no. The heart wasn't just a physical thing, it was an essence. It was tied to the very soul of the lodge, to its foundation, to its history. It was a creature of darkness, but also one of rebirth, of endless cycles. The room trembled again, the stone beneath her feet cracking, shifting as the dark mass continued to grow. The ground groaned as if it were alive, each vibration sending shockwaves through her body. And then she saw it, the figure. The keeper, its form flickering in and out of existence, its eyes glowing with that same malevolent intensity. It stood before the heart, watching her with an expression of sadistic amusement. Its twisted features contorted as it opened its mouth, but this time no words came. The air around them seemed to crackle with an energy so thick, so heavy, that it made it hard to breathe. The keeper's form pulsed as though it were shifting between realities, and for the first time, Sasha saw the full extent of its nature. It was no longer just a creature of the lodge. It was the lodge itself, a manifestation of its will, its hunger. "You cannot kill what is eternal," the keeper rasped, its voice a distorted mockery of the sound it had once been. "You may have destroyed the heart, but the essence remains. This place is ours." Sasha's hands shook as she held the lantern, its light dimming once more. The keeper's form grew more solid, and the darkness around it thickened, like it was feeding, growing stronger with every passing second. The lodge's heartbeat, the real heartbeat, was pounding louder now, shaking the very air, filling every inch of the chamber. She could feel it, the weight of the lodge's power pushing against her chest, threatening to crush her. But she refused to let it win. With all the strength she had left, Sasha lifted the lantern high again, its light flaring brightly, bursting with a pure, white glow. The keeper howled in fury, its form flickering once more as the light clashed against the darkness. But this time there was no hesitation. The light surged forward, cutting through the air like a blade, piercing the heart of the lodge itself. The ground cracked, the walls trembled, and the light burned away the shadows that had held this place together for so long. The keeper's scream echoed in the air as it dissolved into the light. The darkness retreated, its last breath escaping in a hollow, choking gasp. And then, with a final resounding crack, the lodge, the heart, collapsed. The light swallowed it all. And for the first time since she had stepped into this cursed place, Sasha felt the silence settle around her, not as an oppressive weight, but as a true absence. It was over. Sasha stood in the center of the crumbling lodge, her breath slow and ragged, the flickering lantern still in her hands. The light was dimming now, its flame weakened by the struggle, but it was enough to illuminate the remains of what had once been an unholy force. The lodge, the monstrous, living entity that had imprisoned her, twisted her thoughts, and tried to claim her soul, was no more. But as the echoes of the battle faded into the silence, Sasha couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her, still waiting. The dust of the collapsing walls filled the air, swirling in the faint breeze that now seeped through the shattered stone, bringing with it the scent of wet earth and cold stone. The entire structure felt like it was on the verge of being swallowed by the ground itself, as if the very earth beneath it had grown tired of the horrors it had borne. Yet the ground trembled no more. The shadows that had once stalked the corners of the room watching her had retreated entirely. The oppressive weight of fear that had held her captive was gone. For now, it was just her and the remnants of the lodge, an empty, ruined shell of a place that had once been alive with evil. Sasha exhaled, her chest tightening as she looked around the room. The cracks in the stone had deepened, and in some places, the walls had completely fallen away, revealing the open sky beyond. The once dreaded heart of the lodge, the source of the terrible darkness, lay in scattered fragments on the floor, now nothing more than charred remains. The oily, black remnants that had once pulsed with the energy of an ancient, malevolent force were now dim, lifeless. But how long would it stay like this? Sasha's eyes flitted from one broken piece to another, and her mind started to race. Had she truly destroyed the heart, or was it only waiting to regrow, to come back stronger? She thought of the keeper, that twisted figure of shadow and malevolence. Its words echoed in her mind. You cannot kill what is eternal. The truth of those words gnawed at her. Even though the heart had been torn apart, the essence of the lodge had survived. It had been reborn time and time again, feeding on the souls that had wandered too close. How long before it returned? How long before something else, something worse, took its place? She felt the weight of that uncertainty pressing against her. Her victory was hollow. The lodge was dead, but its hunger remained. Stepping carefully through the crumbling stone, Sasha made her way to the shattered doorway that had once led to the grand hall. The air outside was colder than she expected, the first breath of true freedom after what felt like an eternity in that suffocating darkness. The wind whipped around her, carrying with it the sound of distant trees rustling in the forest. The world beyond the lodge was still alive, still turning, unaffected by the horrors that had unfolded inside. But her gaze remained fixed on the ruin behind her, the lodge now nothing more than a hollow shell. She was free, yes, but that freedom came with a burden. She wasn't alone. Sasha's heart skipped a beat as a soft, distant sound reached her ears. It was faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but it grew louder, closer. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, heavy with purpose. Her eyes darted toward the woods, where shadows loomed between the trees. There, in the fading light, she saw a figure, a tall silhouette, draped in shadow, moving through the trees toward the ruins of the lodge. It was no human. She could feel it. A presence unlike anything she had encountered before. The lantern in her hands flared again, the light casting long shadows across the ground. The figure in the distance stopped, unmoving, as if sensing the light. Then, slowly, it tilted its head toward her, its eyes glowing faintly, a soft, eerie amber in the gloom of the forest. Sasha's pulse quickened, her grip tightening on the lantern. The light from it danced in the wind, casting an almost protective aura around her. But even as she stared at the figure, she knew. She felt it. This was no ordinary wanderer. This was no simple forest creature. This was something. and it was coming for her. The footsteps began again, this time faster, more deliberate. The figure closed the distance between them with a speed that took Sasha by surprise. It moved with an almost supernatural grace, its shadowy form blending with the darkness of the trees, yet there was something undeniably otherworldly about it. It wasn't just a manifestation of the forest, it was something deeper, older. Something born from the remnants of the lodge's power. Her breath hitched and her mind raced for answers. The lantern was still glowing, still burning brightly, but would it be enough? Could it protect her from whatever this was? The light had driven away the keeper, the heart, the darkness, but this was different. It was no ghost, no figment of the lodge's cursed memory. The figure stepped out from the shadows of the trees, fully revealed in the waning light. It was tall, much taller than any human, and its form was cloaked in tattered robes of shifting black and gray, as if the fabric were made of the very shadows themselves. Its face, though mostly obscured, was pale, unnaturally pale, with sharp, angular features and eyes that gleamed like twin embers in the dark. It raised a hand, long, bony fingers outstretched toward her, and a whisper, a voice, filled her mind. "You have undone the heart, but you have not undone what was born of it." Sasha's chest tightened. Her legs felt weak, as if the very earth was pulling at her, making it harder to stand. The figure was so close now, too close, and yet she couldn't bring herself to move. It spoke again, its voice not through its mouth, but through the air itself, vibrating in the very depths of her mind. "You have freed the lodge, but it is not free of you. You are bound now forever. You belong to it." She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The words were like chains, sinking deep into her chest, marking her, claiming her as its own. The lantern's light flickered again, weaker this time, as if even the pure light was fading, not from the effort of the struggle, but from the weight of the darkness still alive in the world. Sasha's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the full horror of what had happened. She had been so focused on destroying the lodge that she hadn't considered the true cost of it. The lodge had chosen her, whether she liked it or not. And the force before her, the figure with its burning eyes, was the first of what would likely be many that came to claim what she had taken from them. Her soul was entwined with the lodge, with its heart, and no matter how far she ran, no matter how much she resisted, it would never let her go. The figure's hand reached forward, touching the lantern's flame, and it dimmed. The shadows began to creep in again, thicker and more suffocating than before. "You belong to the heart now, and the heart belongs to you." The darkness closed in around her. The silence, once freeing, now felt like a weight on her chest. And with that, the light flickered one last time before blackness. Sasha's mind buzzed with the whispers, the fragmented thoughts and voices that now echoed in her head. The lantern's light had flickered out, swallowed by the ever-growing shadows. Darkness closed in, suffocating her, and she couldn't tell where the lodge ended and she began. The air was heavy, oppressive, and the weight of the figure's presence bore down on her like a physical force, like it was pressing her into the very earth beneath her feet. The figure's hand still hovered near her, its fingers impossibly long, almost skeletal, and as it reached out toward her, the world seemed to warp. The shadows around them thickened and twisted, taking on forms of their own, distorted, shifting shapes that seemed to whisper her name, pulling at her, urging her forward into the void. Sasha tried to move, tried to break free from the grip of fear that held her in place, but she couldn't. Her legs felt like stone, her body frozen by the weight of something ancient, something that lived deep within her now. The darkness in the forest no longer felt like an external force. It felt like a part of her. It was in her breath, in her veins, in the very fabric of her being. The figure spoke again, and this time, its voice was louder, sharper, filling her mind with an oppressive, cold certainty. "The heart is not dead. It has never been dead. You are its keeper now, Sasha. Its guardian. Its vessel." Sasha's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. She shook her head violently, but the words didn't stop. They echoed through her mind, each syllable sinking deeper, like roots of darkness that twisted into her thoughts. "You are bound to this place. The lodge is yours now. You will guard it, protect it, feed it." The figure's eyes blazed brighter, glowing amber like dying embers, burning into her very soul. Sasha could feel the power it held, the ancient, terrifying force that surged within it. It wasn't just a creature, it was an embodiment of the lodge's will. And now it was offering her its curse, its legacy. Sasha stumbled back, trying to break free, but the ground was shifting beneath her feet, the earth itself pulsing like a living thing. The trees around her seemed to lean inward, their branches twisting and growing, as if drawn to the dark presence of the figure. And the shadows were no longer just shadows. They were alive. They stretched toward her, like fingers, like hands, reaching out from the depths of the lodge, pulling her back into the dark. The lantern that had once held the power to protect her, to drive the darkness away, now felt empty. The light was gone, replaced by the cold weight of the curse that wrapped around her heart. She could feel it now, the lodge's pulse, slow and steady, beating in time with her own. It was inside her. The lodge had claimed her as its own. No, she thought, desperately trying to fight it. I won't be its servant. I won't let it control me. Her hands shook as she reached out for the darkness, as if she could push it away, but the air seemed to grow heavier with each movement. The figure watched her with those burning eyes, its mouth stretched into a twisted smile, as if it were waiting for her to realize the truth. It is too late, the figure whispered, and its voice was cold like ice. You are already ours. Sasha's knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The shadows closed in, pressing against her skin, sinking into her bones. She could feel the weight of the lodge's curse like a chain wrapped around her chest, pulling her deeper into the abyss. She couldn't escape it. And then, as her vision blurred, someone spoke to her. A voice she had not heard in what felt like an eternity. Sasha. It was soft, familiar, almost a whisper in her mind. It was like a breath on the wind, a voice from the past, from the time before the lodge had claimed her. The sound of it gave her a flicker of hope, just a spark of something deep inside that fought against the encroaching darkness. She didn't know who it was, but she could feel its presence, like a faint light in the distance, far beyond the shadows. The figure turned, sensing the change in the air, its gaze darkening as it focused on the faint sound of the voice. Its hand reached out toward her once more, but this time, something different happened. The shadows recoiled. The earth trembled beneath her again, the ground cracking as if the entire world was being torn apart at its seams. The figure's gaze snapped back to her, its eyes narrowing in frustration. It tried to pull the shadows back, to hold them around her, but something was changing. The curse, the dark legacy of the lodge, was no longer the only force at work. Who dares interfere? The figure's voice roared, its words full of raw, seething rage. The faint voice that had called her name grew louder, clearer. It wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a presence. And then, through the darkness, a figure emerged, a human form, hazy at first, but growing clearer with each passing moment. It was a woman, tall and graceful, her form shining with a pale, silver light that pushed back against the shadows. Her eyes, though familiar, were filled with sorrow and strength, a reflection of the very spirit of the lodge, but one that had broken free from its curse. It was her mother. Sasha's heart skipped a beat as she gazed up at the ethereal form of the woman who had died so long ago. Her face, once so familiar, was now a vision of radiant light, and yet there was something different about her. Something changed. Her mother stood at the edge of the shadows, and her presence seemed to defy the darkness, to push back against the grip the lodge had on Sasha's soul. You are stronger than this, Sasha, her mother's voice called, now clear and full of warmth. You are not bound to the lodge. You never were. Sasha's eyes welled with tears as she tried to reach out to her mother, but the darkness held her fast, the weight of the curse like 1,000 chains dragging her down. The figure, the creature of the lodge, roared again, its form twisting and distorting as the shadows surged toward the woman in the light. But her mother raised her hand, and in that moment, the darkness paused. It faltered. The earth shook as if it could no longer bear the weight of the evil that had lived within it for centuries. Sasha, her mother's voice whispered again, but this time, it felt like a call from far away. You have the power to break this, to choose who you are. Choose the light, Sasha. Choose freedom. With those final words, the light around her mother flared, expanding outward like a star bursting into the sky, and Sasha felt the darkness around her shrink away, retreating into the cracks in the earth. Sasha's body was no longer weighed down. Her limbs, once heavy and shackled, felt lighter. Her chest burned with the memory of her mother's words, and she reached out for the light, for her, for the last remnants of her humanity that had been buried beneath the shadows. The figure in front of her shrieked in fury as the light washed over it, but it was too late. The darkness could no longer claim her. The curse had been broken. Sasha's heart pounded in her chest as the light expanded, swallowing the creature, the shadows, the lodge itself. The very ground beneath her feet cracked open, and with a final, brilliant burst, the earth trembled and everything was consumed. And then, silence. Sasha opened her eyes, gasping for breath, her hands still clutched tightly around the lantern, but it was different now. The air was fresh, the sky clear. The weight of the curse had been lifted. The lodge, the heart, was no more. Her mother's presence lingered like a memory, a breath on the wind, but it was fading now, leaving behind only the warmth of love and protection. Sasha looked out across the quiet forest, the trees now bathed in the soft light of dawn. The nightmare was over. She was free. And for the first time she knew who she was. What she was. She was no longer the keeper of the lodge. She was herself. The dawn was breaking. The first light of morning stretched across the horizon, soft and golden, casting long shadows on the forest floor. The trees, now silent and still, stood like sentinels in the quiet of the new day. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the forest was peaceful. The oppressive weight of the curse had lifted, leaving behind only the gentle rustling of the leaves, the distant chirp of birds greeting the dawn, and the sound of Sasha's own heartbeat, steady and strong in her chest. She stood in the clearing, the remnants of the lodge still smoldering in the distance, its dark shape nothing more than a pile of rubble and charred wood. The air was crisp, fresh with the scent of pine and damp earth, no longer thick with the stench of rot and decay that had once clung to the place like a second skin. Sasha's fingers trembled slightly as she held the lantern, now dim and flickering, but it still pulsed with a faint, soft light, almost as if it too was healing, shedding the last remnants of its former power. She didn't need it anymore. She didn't need the shadows, the darkness, or the fear that had once driven her every thought and action. She was free. But as the sun's rays bathed her face in their warm embrace, Sasha knew that freedom came with a price. The whispers that had once filled her mind had fallen silent, but their absence left a void. The darkness had tried to consume her, to make her a part of its eternal cycle, but she had fought back. She had won. But now she had to reckon with the cost of that victory. As she looked around the clearing, her gaze drifting over the ruins of the lodge, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the lives it had taken. The souls that had been consumed by the darkness over the centuries, lost to the twisting hunger of the lodge. The keeper, the shadowed figure that had once commanded her, its voice was gone, but its presence lingered in the air. She could feel it just beneath the surface of everything. The lodge had been a part of her, and she had been a part of it. And that bond, that connection wasn't so easily severed. She could still feel the pulsing rhythm of the heart within her, faint but undeniable. It wasn't the physical heart of the lodge, the dark, twisted thing that had fed on the souls of the lost. It was something deeper, a part of the very fabric of the lodge's being. The lodge had marked her, and no matter how far she ran, no matter how many miles she put between herself and the ruins of the place, it would always be a part of her. But was that a curse? Or a gift? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustling in the trees behind her. She turned slowly, the lantern still held firmly in her grasp, its flickering light casting long shadows on the ground. A figure emerged from the woods, stepping into the clearing. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. He moved with purpose, yet there was a grace to his step that spoke of something ancient, something tied to the forest itself. His presence was quiet, almost reverent, as if he too could feel the weight of the land's history pressing down on him. For a moment, Sasha's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone, anything, to be out here. The forest had been abandoned for so long. The lodge had repelled anyone who dared come near it. But this man wasn't afraid. As he drew closer, the shadows that clung to him seemed to dissipate, like smoke vanishing in the light. His eyes, when he lifted his head, were calm and kind, though there was a depth to them that spoke of untold secrets. They were the color of the forest floor after rain, dark and rich, full of life. And as he looked at her, his gaze softened as if he recognized her, or perhaps had been waiting for her. "Sasha," he said, his voice low and smooth like the murmur of a stream. "It's over." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time since she had escaped the grasp of the lodge, Sasha felt the burden of her journey, the burden of the choices she had made, the burden of knowing that the darkness would never fully leave her. It was too deep inside her. It had been stitched into the very fabric of her being. She looked at him, her heart heavy. "Is it truly over?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost uncertain. "The lodge is gone, but I can still feel it. It's still inside me. He, the keeper, he lives in the spaces between my thoughts, and I can't escape that. I can't forget." The man nodded, his expression solemn but understanding. He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "The keeper is gone, but the forest remains. And so do you. You've chosen to stand here at the crossroads, the place between light and dark." Sasha's brows furrowed in confusion. Crossroads. The heart of the lodge is no longer a physical place, but its power remains. The forest is alive, you see. Its roots run deep, deeper than you can imagine. The lodge was only a vessel, a conduit for something far older, something that is the forest. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. But it is not the darkness that controls it. It is you who now carries that power, and you will decide how it is used. Sasha swallowed, her throat tight. I don't understand. How can I control something so vast, so ancient? The man smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. You have always been a part of it, Sasha. You always will be. The lodge did not create you, and neither did it consume you. You were simply the means by which it awakened. Now you are its keeper, its guardian. Not through domination, but through balance. Sasha's hands tightened around the lantern as she absorbed his words. The power, the essence of the lodge, was not gone. It wasn't something she could simply destroy. It was hers to carry now. But it wasn't just the darkness. It was also the light, the life of the forest, the roots of the trees, the breath of the wind. Her gaze drifted back to the ruins of the lodge, the smoldering remains that still held the echoes of ancient voices. She could still feel the pulse, faint but persistent, like the beating of a heart beneath the earth. And now she understood. The power of the lodge was a living thing, woven into the very bones of the land, and it was her responsibility to protect it, to nurture it. You must keep the balance, the man said, his voice gentle but insistent. The forest will continue to grow, but if it is left unchecked, it will consume everything. You must guard it. Sasha took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. The weight of his words settled around her like a cloak, heavy, ancient, full of responsibility. She opened her eyes and turned back to the man, the lantern still glowing softly in her hands. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered, her voice filled with uncertainty. The man's smile widened, a glimmer of something ancient and knowing in his gaze. You don't have to be ready, Sasha. You never were. You only had to choose. The man's words hung in the air like a heavy mist, settling over Sasha's mind with the weight of inevitability. She had never asked for this role, this responsibility. She had never imagined herself as something more than a lost soul trying to escape the horrors of the lodge. Yet here she was, standing on the precipice of something far greater, far more complex than she could have ever understood. The figure before her seemed to sense her turmoil, for he stepped closer, his gaze steady but compassionate. The forest has chosen you, he said, his voice soft, but it resonated deeply within her. Not because you are special or powerful, but because you understand what it is to lose everything and yet to keep fighting. Sasha clenched her fists, the ache in her chest intensifying as memories of the lodge flooded her mind. The whispers, the keeper, the darkness that had gnawed at her soul for so long. It felt like a scar, deep and raw, something that would never fade. She could still hear the faint echoes of the creatures, the distant screams of those who had been consumed by the lodge's hunger. And now, she was part of that story. A keeper bound to the forest's will. But I don't know how to be a guardian, she said, her voice shaking with uncertainty. I don't know how to control it, how to keep it safe. What if I fail? The man's eyes softened and he reached out, gently touching her shoulder. His hand was cool, yet it carried a sense of reassurance. Something ancient, something that had seen the rise and fall of many guardians before her. You will fail, he said quietly, but you will also rise. The forest does not need perfection. It needs balance, and you will learn just as all guardians must. But you will not be alone. She looked up at him, confusion written across her face. Not alone. The man nodded. There are others, those who watch the forest, those who guard the sacred places. You will not carry the weight of this alone, though the burden will often feel heavy. You will have allies, though they may not always appear as you expect. Sasha felt a flicker of hope, but it was faint, drowned by the weight of her new reality. She had been running from the darkness for so long, trying to outrun the memories of the lodge, the keeper, and the twisted history that had been thrust upon her. Now she was being asked to embrace it, to stand in the middle of this vast, tangled web of magic, darkness, and light. Tell me what to do, she said, her voice stronger now, though tinged with doubt. What do I need to do to protect the forest? The man smiled again, but this time it wasn't one of pity. It was one of understanding. He stepped back, his silhouette framed by the soft light of the rising sun. The forest is vast, he said, his voice becoming distant, almost like the rustling of the leaves. Its roots stretch far beneath the earth, deeper than even the heart of the lodge ever reached. It was never the lodge that controlled the land, Sasha. It was the forest itself. The lodge was only a small thread in its web. Sasha turned, her eyes following the man's gaze. The forest stretched out before her, the trees now standing tall and still, their branches reaching toward the sky. The air was thick with the scent of pine, damp earth, and the promise of something alive, something ancient stirring beneath the surface. There was something alive here. And not just in the trees and the animals, but in the very land itself. You are the bridge between the two worlds, the man continued, his voice drawing her focus back to him. The darkness and the light. The forest and the human world. You must learn to walk that path just as the guardians before you have. You will be tested, but you will also be reborn in each test. Sasha nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She could feel something, an energy, a pulse, coursing beneath her skin. The same energy that had thrummed through the lodge, but now it was different. It was not malicious. It was not dark. It was wild, untamed, like the forest itself. She could almost feel it pushing against her, urging her forward. But the lodge, the keeper, they're gone, she said, looking back at the ruins, the broken remains of the once terrifying place. Why does the forest still feel like it's watching me? The man's eyes darkened slightly, and his gaze turned toward the horizon, where the forest stretched endlessly. The lodge was only one manifestation of the forest's power. It was born of its hunger, its need to feed. But that hunger will not disappear, not so easily. It still lingers even now. The forest will test you, Sasha. It will pull at you, whisper in your ear, just as the keeper once did. It will try to consume you, just as it has consumed others before. Sasha shuddered, the words sinking deep into her bones. She had already felt it, the darkness within her, the echo of the lodge's hunger that had been left behind. But now it wasn't just a part of her past, it was part of her future too. So what do I do? Sasha whispered, her voice breaking. The man stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder once again. You must choose, Sasha. Every day you will choose. The forest does not belong to you, and you do not belong to the forest. But you must live within its bounds, respecting its rules. In time, you will learn how to protect it without being consumed by it. Sasha stood in silence, her heart racing as the weight of his words settled upon her. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She wasn't just someone running from the past. She had to become something new. Remember, the man said softly, the forest is alive and it will watch you. But so will those who walk beside you. He paused as if weighing something before he spoke again. There is one more thing you must know, Sasha. There are still those who seek the heart of the forest. They will come. The creatures of the old world. Those who feed on its power. You will need to learn their ways, learn how to defend yourself from them. But you are not alone in that fight. Sasha's eyes narrowed, her pulse quickening. Who else? The man stepped back, the shadows beginning to swallow his form as if he were part of them, part of the very fabric of the forest. You will meet them in time. The others like you. Guardians who have walked the path before you. They will help you, guide you. But it is your journey, Sasha. And only you can choose which way it goes. With that, he turned, his form melting into the trees, vanishing as if he were never there at all. Sasha stood there for a long moment, staring at the place where the man had been. The forest around her was still and quiet once again, the only sound the whisper of the wind through the trees. She was alone again, but not for long. With a deep breath, she lifted the lantern once more. It still glowed faintly, but it was enough for now. As the light flickered in the early morning air, she felt a new resolve build within her. This was her new path, her new life, and she would walk it. The forest was alive, more alive than Sasha had ever realized. Every rustling leaf, every creaking branch, every bird call carried a message, a murmur that ran deep into the roots of the earth itself. It was as though the very land breathed alongside her, stretching out in endless, unbroken lines toward the horizon, carrying with it the untold stories of time. Yet, for all its beauty, for all the life that surrounded her, there was a quiet unease, a stillness beneath the surface that reminded Sasha of the fragile balance she was now bound to protect. The weight of the lantern in her hands was no longer comforting. It had once been a symbol of her defiance, a light in the dark, but now it felt heavier, more like a tether, a constant reminder of what she had become and what she had inherited. The faint glow it emitted was still soft, pulsing with an energy that had grown familiar. But with each passing moment, it felt less like a tool of protection and more like a part of her, a living extension of her soul, intricately tied to the ancient, restless force that had once been the lodge. Sasha walked deeper into the forest, the towering trees closing in around her as she ventured further from the ruins of the lodge. The path was unclear, the undergrowth thick with vines and branches, but she moved with purpose, as if something was guiding her, something beyond her understanding. The forest was pulling her in, not as a predator, but as a partner, as a vessel that carried the forest's will. She could feel it now, the hum beneath the earth, the slow rhythm of nature that intertwined with her heartbeat. The earth was speaking to her, offering its ancient knowledge in waves of sensation, images, and fleeting thoughts that drifted in and out of her mind. They were too fast, too fragmented to fully grasp, but the message was clear. She belonged here. And yet, as she ventured deeper, a dark thought crept into the back of her mind. The balance the man had spoken of, the one between light and dark, between life and death, was delicate, fragile. She had inherited the responsibility, but was she truly prepared for what was to come? The forest might allow her to walk this path, but would it be enough to shield her from the things that lurked beyond it? The creatures that still hungered for the power of the heart? The distant hum of the earth pulsed in her chest, drawing her onward. Sasha had been walking for hours, or maybe it had only been minutes. Time had begun to stretch and bend in this place. The shadows of the trees were growing longer, but it was no longer the sun's movement she was following. The forest was leading her. The cool breeze seemed to guide her footsteps, shifting direction with an invisible hand. Then, in the distance, she saw it, a figure standing motionless near the edge of a small clearing. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadows, its face obscured by a hood, just like the man who had spoken to her at the ruins. But this one was different. This one felt different. Sasha's breath caught in her throat as she approached, instinctively tightening her grip on the lantern. The figure didn't move, but it was aware of her presence. She could feel it. As she drew closer, the figure slowly turned, revealing a face that was both familiar and unfamiliar. The features were sharp, angular, like a carving made from the very stone of the forest. But it was the eyes that caught her attention. Two burning orbs of amber, just like the ones the man had possessed. But these were not eyes of understanding or compassion. These eyes were ancient. They glimmered with the knowledge of 1,000 lifetimes, with the weight of a force much older than the forest itself. Sasha, the figure spoke, its voice a soft whisper that echoed in the stillness, yet carried a weight that was undeniable. She froze. "Who are you?" The figure's lips curved upward in a slow, almost imperceptible smile. "I am one who watches, one who walks the shadows." Sasha's heart quickened, her instincts on high alert. There was something unnerving about this figure, something deeply unnatural about it. The man who had spoken to her at the lodge had been enigmatic but grounded. This being, however, was a different presence altogether. You are not like the others," Sasha said, taking a step back, her hand still clutching the lantern. "No," the figure agreed, its voice soft but firm. "I am not like the ones you've encountered before. I am of the old world, the world that existed before the forest grew into what it is now. I am a guardian too in my own way, but I walk in the spaces between." Sasha's brow furrowed. "The spaces between?" The figure nodded slowly. "Yes, the forest is not simply a place of life and light. It is a doorway, a bridge to the worlds beyond this one, and I guard the passage between them." Sasha's mind raced. The keeper, he spoke of the old world, the world beyond the trees. Is that what you are? The figure tilted its head, its amber eyes glowing brighter. "In a way, yes. The keeper was a manifestation of the forest's hunger, but it was also a harbinger of what lies beyond the veil. There are forces out there, beings that live between worlds, and they seek the heart. They will come for it for you. You have inherited its power, and it has made you a beacon. But not just for the forest, for them." Sasha's heart sank. She had known, in the pit of her stomach, that the forest's rebirth came at a cost. But this was something else, something darker. "You're saying they'll come for me?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it stepped forward, its shadow stretching long across the ground. "They will come for the power that you now carry. The forest is vast, but the heart's power, it is more than this place can contain. Those who walk in the spaces between, the ones who exist beyond the reach of time and space, they will sense it just as you sense them." Sasha felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. She could feel it now, something watching from the edges of her awareness, something hungry. "The balance you seek," the figure continued, "is more fragile than you realize. The heart cannot be destroyed, nor can it be contained, but it can be misused. And when it is, the old ones will come." Sasha swallowed hard. She had known there was more to the forest than just trees and leaves. She had known that there was darkness lingering, hiding beneath the surface. But this was a new kind of fear. Something much older, much more dangerous. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice shaking. How do I protect it? How do I stop them? The figure stepped closer, its form shifting in the dim light. You will need to learn more, Sasha. You must call upon the guardians who have walked this path before you. You are not alone, but you must seek them out. They will teach you how to hold the balance. But first, you must understand the power that is the forest. You must learn its secrets, and you must decide how far you are willing to go to protect it. Sasha nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling like stone in her chest. She had fought the darkness, had defeated the keeper, but now she understood. The battle was far from over. She had been chosen, but the real test was yet to come. And as the forest stretched out before her, silent and waiting, Sasha knew one thing for sure. She could no longer run from her destiny. The figure stood before Sasha, its amber eyes glowing softly in the dim light, as if aware of the storm of thoughts and emotions crashing through her mind. She felt the weight of the decision before her. The mantle of the guardian, of the forest itself, was heavy, heavier than anything she had ever carried, and yet it felt as though it had always been meant for her. A part of her had always known that this day would come, that the path she had walked would lead her here to this moment, where the veil between worlds would shift. She couldn't escape it. Not anymore. Sasha exhaled, her breath slow and deliberate, her hand tightening around the lantern. The faint pulse of light from it still echoed with the power of the heart, resonating deep within her chest, and with each beat she could feel the forest's breath. It was alive, alive in a way she had never understood, in a way that went far beyond the trees and animals, far beyond the seasons and the cycles of nature. The figure, sensing her resolve, nodded once, a slight dip of its hooded head. "It is time," it said, its voice calm and resonant. "The veil will shift. The forest will reveal its true nature to you. But first, you must choose how you will wield the power of the heart. How you will walk the path of a guardian." Sasha stared at the figure, her heart pounding as a deep, inexplicable sense of unease gripped her chest. There were so many questions, so many unknowns. Could she really control this power? Could she walk this path without being consumed by it, just as the keeper had once sought to consume her? And most troubling of all, what lay beyond the veil? What did the figure mean when it spoke of forces that existed between worlds? "I don't know what you mean by between worlds," Sasha said, her voice quiet but firm. "What are these beings you speak of? And how do I protect the heart if they come for it?" The figure paused, its expression unreadable beneath the shadow of its hood. Then, slowly, it stepped forward, the earth beneath it seemingly alive with each movement. "The spaces between are not merely empty voids," it began, its voice soft, yet weighted with an ancient understanding. "They are places of transition, of liminality, where life and death, light and darkness touch, where the threads of existence weave in and out of one another. These beings are not of our world, not of the mortal realm, but they are drawn to power, to the heart." Sasha felt a cold shiver run down her spine at the mention of the heart, the pulsing core of the forest that now resided within her. She could feel it deep inside her chest, a rhythm that was both a heartbeat and something more. Something far older, far more powerful than any human could truly understand. "But how?" Sasha's voice faltered, then she tried again, her breath hitching. "How can I stop them if they are not of this world?" The figure regarded her, its eyes deep and knowing. "You cannot stop them with strength alone. You cannot fight them in the way you would a mortal enemy. To protect the heart, you must understand its true nature. You must understand the veil itself." Sasha looked at the figure, confused. "The veil?" "The veil," it said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of its lips, "is the barrier between worlds. The fabric that separates the living from the dead, the seen from the unseen. The heart, the forest, it exists at the crossroads of these realms. You, Sasha, are the thread that holds them together." Her head spun with the enormity of the words. I don't understand. I'm just me." "You are more than just yourself now," the figure said, its voice becoming quieter, more insistent. "The heart of the forest pulses within you. You are its chosen vessel, its guardian. You are bound to it just as it is bound to you. The veil will always be thin where you walk. It will shift, bend, and grow thinner in places where the power is strongest. And that power will call to those who walk between worlds." Sasha swallowed, her throat tight. The weight of her new reality was pressing on her chest, suffocating her. It was too much. She was not a goddess, not a being of immense power. She was just a woman who had been thrust into a world she didn't understand, a world that now demanded everything from her. And yet, as the figure stood before her, its presence oddly comforting despite the terror it inspired, she knew that she had no choice. She had to learn. She had to survive. I want to protect it," Sasha whispered, her voice raw, her emotions trembling just beneath the surface. I want to protect the heart. I'll do whatever it takes. The figure's expression softened slightly, as if it had expected this answer. It stepped closer to her, its presence overwhelming, and for the first time, Sasha realized just how vast the power around her truly was. The forest wasn't just alive, it was a force. A force that had been in motion long before she had ever stepped into its shadows, and one that would continue to move long after she was gone. You must prepare yourself then, the figure said, its voice like the wind rustling through the leaves. You will need to know how to navigate the veil, how to walk between worlds, because soon the first of the old ones will come for you. The mention of the old ones made Sasha's blood run cold. She had sensed something, felt something, out there in the corners of her mind, a presence waiting, lurking just beyond her awareness. Now it seemed that her fear had a name. But how? She asked, her voice trembling. How can I fight something that exists between worlds? The figure's eyes glimmered with understanding. You cannot fight them with force alone, Sasha. But you can fight them with knowledge, with the strength of the forest itself. The heart is a conduit, a link to the land, to the spirits that dwell within it. The first step is to learn the old ways, the ancient rituals of the guardians. You must connect with the forest in ways that go beyond mere mortal understanding. Only then will you be able to protect it. Sasha looked down at the lantern in her hand. It flickered softly, the light growing steadier now, as if it had taken on a life of its own, a rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. The weight of her responsibility felt heavier than before, but it wasn't a burden she could cast aside. The veil was real. The forces that moved between worlds were real, and they were coming. Sasha had no choice but to stand her ground, to embrace the power within her and the dark path that lay ahead. I'm ready, she said, her voice stronger now, though uncertainty still clung to her words. Teach me what I need to know. I'll learn. I'll do what I have to. The figure nodded slowly, its expression unreadable. Very well, Sasha. You have taken the first step. Now come with me. The first lesson begins. The figure's hood shifted in the breeze, revealing only a glimmer of pale, almost translucent skin beneath. Sasha's heart pounded, but her feet moved with an instinct she couldn't explain. She wasn't sure whether it was the pull of the forest itself or the unspoken promise in the figure's words that had driven her forward, but she followed without hesitation. The trees seemed to part as they walked, the underbrush thinning, revealing a winding path that stretched deep into the heart of the forest. The air grew cooler as they ventured further, the sunlight dimming as the canopy thickened above. Yet, despite the shadows, there was a strange luminescence in the air, like the forest itself was alive, and each step Sasha took drew her deeper into its pulse. The figure led her through the silent woods, its every step echoing like a quiet rhythm beneath the ever-growing hum of the land. It didn't speak again, but Sasha could feel the presence of knowledge that emanated from it, a quiet understanding that hung between them like an invisible thread. She wanted to ask more, to learn more, but something in the silence between them told her that all things would come in time. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a clearing unlike any Sasha had ever seen. The trees here were enormous, their trunks gnarled and twisted, their roots extending like veins into the earth. The air was thick with a deep, almost reverent energy, and the ground beneath her feet hummed softly, as though the very earth itself was alive with ancient power. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, weathered by time, but still intact as if untouched by the ages. Its surface was etched with symbols, runes that seemed to shift as Sasha gazed upon them as if alive. The symbols were unfamiliar to her, but as her eyes traced them, she felt a stirring in her chest. The pulse of the heart, the forest's heart, was stronger here, resonating through her body like a living thing. The figure turned to her, its voice a whisper in the stillness of the clearing. This is the Heartstone. It is a sacred place, one of the ancient rituals. Here, you will learn how to connect with the forest in ways that go beyond the mortal world. It is here that you must learn to walk the paths between worlds. Sasha felt a chill crawl up her spine as she stepped closer to the altar, its cold surface sending a shock through her fingers as she brushed against it. The symbols beneath her touch began to glow faintly, illuminating the runes in a soft, otherworldly light. The air seemed to crackle, and the forest around her seemed to shift, its presence swelling in a way that felt almost sentient. What do I need to do? Sasha whispered, her voice barely a breath, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might break the fragile balance of the place. The figure stepped behind her, its shadow stretching long across the altar. Place your hand upon the stone. Let the forest's pulse become yours. Sasha hesitated for only a moment before she placed her palm flat against the cold stone. The moment her skin made contact, the world seemed to shift. The air grew thick with an energy so intense, so ancient, that it nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. A sharp, tingling sensation rushed up her arm, spreading through her veins like a cold fire igniting in her chest. Her heart beat faster, its rhythm syncing with the deep, rumbling pulse beneath the earth, as if the forest itself was calling to her. Her vision blurred, and the world around her seemed to dissolve. The stone beneath her hand was no longer cold, it was alive, its surface vibrating with a primal force, as though it were a conduit to something much, much older than the trees, older than the earth itself. She could feel the history of the forest flowing through her, its creation, its growth, its pain, and its death. She could feel the weight of the guardians who had come before her, their lives and their sacrifices, echoing through the stone like a distant cry. And then, without warning, the veil opened. Sasha gasped, her body trembling as she felt herself being pulled forward. The world around her twisted, as if the very fabric of reality was bending and folding upon itself. She saw flashes of movement, figures in the distance, shadowy and indistinct, crossing between the worlds. Beings that moved in and out of existence, their forms flickering like half-remembered dreams. They were there and not there, living and not living. The space between worlds was thin here. So thin that she could almost reach out and touch it. She was no longer in the clearing. She was no longer in the forest. She was standing at the threshold of something vast, something endless. The air was different here, cooler, thicker, and suffused with a strange, luminous fog. Shadows clung to the edges of her vision, twisting and shifting in a way that felt alive. The edges of reality itself seemed to fray, pulling apart like worn fabric. "Look," the figure's voice came, distant yet clear. Sasha turned her head and saw a vast expanse before her, a world that seemed to stretch endlessly, a place where the land was barren, yet alive with movement. Creatures that she could not fully comprehend drifted in and out of sight, their shapes shifting, ever-changing. The landscape was a fractured reflection of the forest, but twisted and distorted. The ground was made of dark stone, veins of glowing, pulsing energy snaking beneath its surface. It was a place of raw, primal power, a place between life and death, between light and dark, where the ancient forces of the world bled together. "This is the space between," the figure said, its voice reverberating through the strange realm. "The land of the forgotten, where the old ones walk. The ancient beings who exist outside of time, outside of the mortal world. They seek the heart, Sasha, and they will come for it. But it is not just them that you must guard against." Sasha felt her breath catch in her throat as she turned to face the figure. It was no longer fully corporeal. Its form was blurry, flickering between the veil and the world she stood in. It was as though the figure itself was a part of this place, yet separate from it. "You," Sasha's voice faltered, confusion flooding her thoughts. "How can I fight something that moves between these worlds? How can I stop them?" The figure's eyes glowed softly, almost sorrowfully. "You cannot fight them with strength alone. You must understand their nature. The veil is not a barrier, it is a passage, a doorway. If you are to protect the heart, you must learn to walk both worlds. You must bridge the gap, find the balance, and learn to navigate the spaces between them." Sasha's head spun as the weight of those words sank in. The power she had inherited was not just the forests, it was this too. The veil, the old ones, the creatures that slipped between the worlds, all of it was now tied to her. She was the keeper, the guardian, not just of the forest, but of the very threshold that separated existence from oblivion. "Let the veil teach you," the figure murmured as it began to fade into the swirling mist around them. "The forest is not just a place, it is a doorway. You must understand both its life and its death. Only then will you know how to protect it." Before she could respond, the figure was gone, vanished into the fog of the space between worlds. Sasha was left alone, standing at the threshold, the air thick with the energy of the land. The fog began to curl around her, enveloping her like a shroud, and in that moment she understood. This was just the beginning. Her journey had only just begun. The veil still lingered in Sasha's mind, thick like a fog that refused to lift. She could feel it now, wrapped around her thoughts like an invisible shroud, tugging at the edges of her awareness, constantly reminding her that the space between worlds was no longer just something out there, it was a part of her, a part of the forest. And soon she would have to learn to navigate it if she had any hope of protecting what she had inherited. She closed her eyes, her hands still resting on the heartstone, as the faint glow of the runes continued to pulse softly beneath her fingers. The world around her seemed to quiet, and for a moment, the strange realm she had glimpsed through the veil seemed to settle. Her body thrummed with the energy of the forest, the heartbeat of the earth reverberating through her bones. She could almost hear the trees whispering, could feel the ancient rhythm of the land beneath her feet. But it wasn't enough. The knowledge she had gained was still fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle she could not yet complete. She had seen the space between worlds, the creatures that slipped in and out of existence, but she hadn't understood it. And if she was to protect the heart, to defend the forest, she needed more than just a fleeting glimpse. She needed to understand the veil, the creatures that walked between it, and the dark power that sought to breach it. Sasha stood, her fingers pulling away from the heartstone with a reluctant sigh. The forest, the world, seemed to pause with her as if awaiting her next step. The air was thick, pulsing with an almost unbearable weight. She turned, the sound of the leaves crunching beneath her boots a hollow echo in the otherwise silent clearing. The figure who had led her here was gone, but she knew she wasn't alone. The forest had 1,000 eyes. It had always watched her, even when she hadn't known it. And now, as its guardian, it was waiting for her to take the next step. The deep, ancient voice of the figure echoed in her mind. The veil is not a barrier, it is a passage. Sasha's thoughts swirled around the cryptic words as she stepped away from the heartstone, her eyes scanning the eerie stillness around her. The world had grown quieter, the hum of the earth beneath her slowing as if it were holding its breath. She felt a pull in her chest, a quiet calling, urging her to continue. Something was waiting for her, just beyond the horizon of what she understood. The space between worlds had opened, and it was calling her. She walked, drawn by an invisible thread, toward the edge of the clearing. The trees loomed large, their twisted branches stretching out like gnarled fingers reaching for the sky. The undergrowth thickened, the air growing colder with each step, and as she moved further, the sounds of the forest seemed to fade, replaced by a deep, oppressive silence. It was as if the veil had shifted again, slipping closer to the physical world, a presence that weighed heavily on the air. In the distance she saw it, a figure standing motionless, its silhouette just visible through the thickening mist. It was the same figure from before, but this time it felt different. More tangible. More real. The energy surrounding it seemed to pulse with something darker, something ancient. Sasha's heart quickened, her instinct screaming at her to turn back. But she couldn't. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As she approached, the figure turned slowly, its face still obscured by a hood. It was taller now, more imposing, as if it had been waiting for her. And in that moment, Sasha understood. This figure, this entity, was not just a guardian. It was something else. Something older. "You've come," the figure said, its voice low and resonant, as if the words were a weight on the air itself. Sasha's throat tightened. "Who are you?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "What do you want from me?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering her question before answering. "I am one who walks between. Just as you now walk between worlds. You have felt the pulse of the heart, the shift in the veil. You are bound to it now." Sasha's pulse raced as the truth of the words settled in. She was bound to it, the heart, the forest, and the veil itself. She had crossed the threshold, and there was no going back. "You are not the only one," the figure continued, its voice growing softer. "There are others like you. Guardians who protect the balance between worlds. We walk in the shadows, on the edges of reality. We hold the gate, but not all can understand it. Few are chosen." Sasha took a step back, her heart pounding louder in her ears. She didn't understand. The space between worlds, this place where the veil was thin, was a gateway. A passage. It was more than a concept. It was an existence in itself. And Sasha, in her ignorance, had stumbled into its deepest heart. "You've seen the old ones," the figure continued, its voice almost a whisper now. "They are drawn to the heart, to the power it holds. But there are other creatures that slip between the cracks, creatures that exist in the shadows of these realms. They are the forgotten things, the things that were once lost to time. The things the forest remembers but wishes to forget." Sasha shuddered at the mention of forgotten things, a chill sweeping through her bones. She had heard the whispers in the wind, seen the flickers in the dark corners of her mind, but now she understood. The creatures of the veil were not just shadows. They were old, and they were hungry. "Tell me how to stop them," Sasha demanded, her voice stronger now, filled with a new urgency. "I can't protect the heart if I don't understand how to fight them." The figure raised a hand, and the air around them seemed to shimmer and distort. "You cannot fight them with strength alone. The heart holds power, but it also holds memory. You must learn to navigate the spaces between, to shift as they shift." The veil is a realm of change, of movement, of transition. You must learn its ways. Only then can you understand how to guard the heart. Sasha's mind was reeling. Shift? Transition? What did that mean? The figure stepped closer, its form shifting in and out of focus, as if it too were part of the veil, part of the shifting boundary between worlds. You must walk through the veil, Sasha. You must cross it not as an observer but as a part of it. Only then will you understand the creatures that dwell within it, the way they move between the cracks, the way they are bound to the heart. They are the keepers of the forgotten, the lost things that feed on power. And if you do not learn how to move through the veil, they will consume you. Sasha's heart skipped a beat. Consume her? She had been prepared for the guardians, the old ones, the forces of the veil. But not this. Not this hunger. She looked down at her hand, still resting lightly on the heartstone, feeling its pulse against her skin. It was warmer now, thrumming with energy, and she knew in that moment that she was connected to something much larger than herself. The weight of it was almost unbearable, and yet she could not walk away. Sasha lifted her gaze to the figure, determination hardening within her. Then teach me. Show me how to shift. Show me how to protect the heart. The figure nodded, its eyes glowing with an unreadable expression. You are not the first to ask, but you may be the last who truly understands. And with that, the figure began to fade, dissolving into the shadows of the veil, leaving Sasha standing alone, at the crossroads between worlds, where the forgotten things waited, and where the heart still beat, drawing them closer. The figure had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Sasha alone in the thickening shadows of the veil. The pulse of the heartstone had faded slightly, but its presence remained, throbbing gently beneath her fingertips. It was a connection she could no longer ignore. She was bound to it, to the forest, to the very heart of the land itself. And that connection would soon be tested in ways she had never imagined. The air around her felt charged, as if the very fabric of reality was trembling, pulling at the edges of her perception. The veil was thin here, thinner than it had ever been before, and Sasha could feel it, every whispered breath of it, every ripple of its presence shifting just beyond her understanding. There were forces at play in the spaces between, forces that she was only beginning to understand. She looked around, her eyes narrowing as the landscape around her seemed to shift, like a mirage wavering in the heat. The trees that had once stood so solidly were now distant, flickering like shadows, their bark seeming to warp and bend as though they weren't entirely real. The air was thick with a cold, unnatural fog that curled around her, clinging to her skin, pulling at her senses. But it wasn't just the environment that had changed, it was her. She could feel it deep within her bones, an unfamiliar strength, an ancient power stirring in her chest. The lantern in her hand pulsed faintly, its light growing steadier as she concentrated. She was attuned to the forest, yes, but now it was as if the forest was attuned to her. Its rhythms, its life force, its pulse, all intertwined with her own. She could feel the paths that led between the worlds, the secret threads that wove through the fabric of existence. And she could feel the pull of those threads, beckoning her towards something else. The veil has opened, the figure's voice echoed in her mind, its tone urgent yet distant. You must walk through it, Sasha. You must learn to shift and move as they do. This is the first step. Sasha swallowed, her mouth dry. She had no idea what it meant to shift between worlds. The very idea seemed incomprehensible, like trying to grasp at mist, to hold on to something intangible. But if she was going to protect the heart, to defend the forest and all that it stood for, she had no choice. She had to learn. She had to face whatever lay on the other side of the veil. Taking a deep breath, she raised her lantern higher, watching as its light flickered and shifted in response to her command. She could feel the forest's breath, its power, running through her as she took the first tentative step forward. The air around her seemed to shift again, the fog thickening, swirling like a living thing. She could hear whispers now, faint and distant, murmuring in a language she didn't understand. They were just beyond her reach, like voices carried on the wind, calling her towards something. The space between her and the unknown grew narrower with each step she took. Sasha's pulse quickened as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, more real. The veil itself seemed to stretch before her, an invisible threshold that beckoned her forward. She didn't know what she expected, but as she crossed the line, stepping fully into the shifting world beyond, it was as if the earth itself had given way beneath her feet. The familiar world around her began to dissolve, fading into nothingness as she was pulled forward, deeper into the veil. Her senses were overloaded, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the transition. One moment she was standing on solid ground, and the next she was surrounded by an overwhelming, unearthly light, blinding her eyes and drowning her thoughts. For a moment, she lost her bearings, her body twisting in the currents of the veil. The light surged around her, its intensity growing with every passing second, its warmth turning into something much darker. The air itself felt dense, thick with a force that didn't belong to the world she had once known. The sound of whispers was deafening now, the voices rising and falling in a maddening chorus. They surrounded her, swarming her thoughts, pulling her deeper into the unseen corners of the veil. She tried to speak, but her words seemed to vanish, swallowed by the vastness of the space between worlds. She couldn't tell where the land ended and where she began. This is the first lesson. The figure's voice rang through her mind, steady and commanding. You must learn to shift with purpose, Sasha. The veil will pull at you, but you must not be lost in it. Sasha's heart hammered in her chest as she fought to keep her focus. She had to center herself. She had to remember the forest, the lantern, the connection that had anchored her to this world. She reached deep within herself, feeling for the pulse of the land, the heartbeat of the heart. The mist around her began to shift, the edges of the veil wavering as if it could sense her growing awareness. Slowly, the overwhelming light began to dim, and Sasha found herself standing once again in the midst of a shifting landscape. The world around her was no longer the forest she had known, it was something else, something broken. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching upward like skeletal fingers, but the air felt wrong as if it carried a shadow, a sickness that was slowly bleeding into the land. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and barren, the earth dry and desolate. The fog hung thick in the air, swirling like smoke from a long-dead fire. In the distance there was movement, a figure standing still, its shape indistinct in the gloom. The whispers in the air grew louder again, now accompanied by a low growl that rumbled in the depths of the earth, vibrating through her bones. Something was here, something ancient and hungry. She could feel its presence like a distant, suffocating pressure against her skin. Suddenly, the figure turned, its face emerging from the shadow. It was not human, not even in the way she could have imagined. It was a shifting mass of darkness, with eyes, two glowing orbs that pierced through the fog, locking onto her with unnerving intensity. It wasn't just watching her, it was waiting. Sasha's heart skipped a beat, her blood running cold. The thing in front of her was no mere shadow. It was one of the creatures of the veil, one of the forgotten things the figure had warned her about. It was drawn to the power of the heart, to the pulse of the forest, and it was now standing in front of her, just beyond the threshold of reality. It opened its mouth, and a voice unlike anything she had ever heard echoed through her mind. Come closer. The words reverberated in her head, like a distant echo. It wasn't a voice that invited, it was a voice that demanded. Sasha took a step back, instinctively raising the lantern in front of her, the light flickering violently as the creature's eyes glowed brighter. The force that had pulled her here, that had shifted the veil, was still present, and it was feeding on her fear. The figure's words from earlier echoed in her mind. You must learn to shift with purpose. The veil will pull at you, but you must not be lost in it. Sasha drew a shaky breath, her hands steadying as she clutched the lantern. This wasn't just about strength. It was about will. Purpose. She focused, reaching into the pulse of the heart, feeling its steady beat as it echoed through the veil. Slowly, she drew in the energy, calling on the ancient power that flowed through her, letting the light of the lantern grow brighter, sharper. The creature recoiled, its form flickering in the dense mist. Sasha could feel it, the pull of the veil, the way it tried to draw her in, to overwhelm her. But she pushed back, focusing her will, letting the light of the lantern guide her through the fog, through the darkness and beyond. The creature hissed, its glowing eyes narrowing. It couldn't reach her, not now. But Sasha knew this was just the beginning. She had stepped into the veil, and the creatures that dwelled within it were only the first challenge she would face. The path ahead was unclear, but she had made it this far, and she would make it further. She had to. The heart, the forest, everything depended on it. Sasha stood alone, the silence of the veil pressing in on her from all sides. The creature had retreated, its glowing eyes burning into her thoughts as it faded back into the fog. The pull of the veil had subsided for now, but the darkness that lingered in the distance, just beyond the edges of her vision, seemed to stretch endlessly. It was as though the very fabric of this place was a living thing, breathing, shifting, hungry for something. Her. Her heart was still racing, the pulse of the lantern in her hand steadying as she fought to calm her breath. The creature was only the beginning. She had known that, but experiencing it firsthand, feeling its presence in her bones, had been something entirely different. It was the very essence of the veil, ancient, primal, and hungry for the power that coursed through the heart. But Sasha wasn't just a passive observer here. She had crossed the line. She was no longer just standing on the edge of the veil. She was in it. And this place, it was more than she could have ever imagined. The mist that curled around her feet seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, alive with memories of forgotten things. She could feel the weight of the past here, a heavy presence that clung to the air. As she took a step forward, she noticed something flickering in the distance. At first, it seemed like a mirage, just another trick of the shifting light, but the closer she drew, the more solid it became. There, in the fog, was a tall, cracked mirror standing upright, its edges glowing faintly with a cold, ethereal light. Sasha stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't just a mirror, it was alive. She could feel it calling to her, drawing her toward it as if it had been waiting for her to find it. The fog around her thickened, swirling like a storm, and the whispers returned, voices in a language she could almost understand, a chorus of forgotten souls. They spoke of things that had never been meant for the living, things that had been hidden in the cracks between worlds. They spoke of her. Sasha reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the cold surface of the mirror. The moment her skin made contact, a shock of energy surged through her body, a bolt of raw power that made her gasp in surprise. The mirror flickered, and the reflections within it rippled like water, distorting, bending in ways that defied the laws of reality. Her own reflection shifted, but not as she expected. It didn't show the face she knew, it showed something else. Something older. The reflection was darker, more haunting, as though it were a twisted echo of herself, a shadow of what she had become in this place. The figure in the mirror was dressed in the same clothes, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, flickering like the lantern in her hand. Its expression was solemn, its gaze piercing as it stared back at her. Sasha stepped back, her heart racing again. What was this? What did it mean? The reflection moved, her, in perfect synchrony with her own movements, but then it began to change. Its expression twisted into something darker, and it smiled, an eerie, unnatural grin that made Sasha's stomach churn. The eyes in the mirror narrowed, glowing brighter as it spoke in a voice that was not her own, but one that came from somewhere deep within the veil. "You seek to control the veil," the reflection whispered, its voice like 1,000 distant echoes. "But do you understand its true nature? Do you understand your own nature now? You are bound to the heart, yes, but you are also bound to the veil. And the veil is not just a place. It is a reflection of you." Sasha recoiled, her breath quickening. "What do you mean?" The reflection's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold, infinite knowledge. "You cannot control the veil as you would a tool, Sasha. It is not a thing to be wielded. It is a part of you, as much a part of the forest, the heart, as your very soul. To truly understand it, you must confront what lies within." The mirror seemed to ripple again, and Sasha's reflection began to change once more. The figure in the glass morphed, becoming more twisted, more grotesque, until it resembled a dark version of herself, a shadow of her own fears, her deepest insecurities. "You will face the things you have hidden from," the reflection continued, its voice now a sinister whisper. "The veil shows you more than the world beyond. It shows you everything, your past, your choices, your fears, and your greatest weaknesses. The heart of the forest is your strength, but it also mirrors your darkness." Sasha stumbled back, shaking her head, trying to break the connection. The reflection's eyes bored into hers, piercing her thoughts, making her feel exposed, raw, as if all her deepest secrets were laid bare. "No, I'm not. I'm not like that," she whispered, more to herself than the reflection. But the figure in the mirror only smiled. "You are. We all are. The forest, the veil, the heart, they are not just places of power. They are places of truth. And truth, Sasha, is never kind." The air around her seemed to press in, suffocating her, and Sasha stumbled backward. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the mirror, from the reflection that seemed to reach out to her, drawing her into its depths. Her chest tightened as the whispers around her grew louder, more frantic. She felt something stirring beneath her skin, as though the veil itself was crawling into her soul, making her confront everything she had been running from. Her heart pounded in her ears, and she could feel the pull of the darkness, of her own darkness, whispering to her, calling her to step forward, to lose herself in the reflection. It was the same pull she had felt before, when the creatures of the veil had tried to consume her, and it was just as insidious. But then something snapped inside her. With a sharp breath, Sasha reached forward again, this time with purpose. She grabbed the edge of the mirror and yanked it toward her, forcing herself to face the reflection head-on. "I am not afraid," she said aloud, though her voice shook with uncertainty. "I will not let you control me, As her hand made contact with the mirror, a brilliant surge of light exploded from the surface, blinding her. She staggered back, the light swirling around her like a storm, pushing the darkness back, pulling the veil's whispers into silence. The reflection in the mirror shattered, the pieces splintering into the air like shards of glass. For a long moment, everything was still. The mist around her dissipated, leaving behind an eerie calm. The mirror, once a portal into the unknown, was gone, broken, scattered across the ground. Sasha stood there, trembling, her breath shallow, her mind reeling from the experience. She had faced the darkness of the veil, her darkness, and had chosen to step through it. The reflection had tried to swallow her, but she had refused. But the truth, the weight of what she had seen, still lingered in her chest. The forest, the heart, the veil, they were all connected not just through power but through something deeper. The heart was not just a force of life, it was a force of truth, and Sasha was tied to it, bound to face the truth of herself, of her past, of everything that made her human. The path ahead was more uncertain than ever. The creatures of the veil were not the only thing she had to fight. To protect the heart, she would have to conquer the deepest parts of herself, those things she had hidden, the things she was most afraid to confront. The mirror had shown her the way, but the real battle had only just begun. The shattered pieces of the mirror lay scattered across the fog-choked ground, glinting with a cold, unnatural light as Sasha slowly stepped away from the wreckage. The reflection was gone, but the echo of its presence lingered, still crawling under her skin like an invasive thought. The whispers had quieted for now, but the weight of the truth they had uncovered pressed heavily on her chest. She had seen herself, truly seen herself, stripped of the layers she had built over the years. The fears, the insecurities, the darkness she had hidden even from herself. The veil hadn't just shown her the creatures beyond the realms, it had shown her the shadows within. And those shadows were not so easily cast aside. Sasha took a deep, steadying breath, her hand instinctively tightening around the lantern. The faint glow it cast was a small comfort in the vast emptiness of this place, this liminal space where nothing was ever certain. The veil had revealed a great deal, but she knew it had only shown her the beginning. The heart was calling her, urging her forward, and she could no longer avoid the path that lay ahead. She needed answers. The reflection had told her that truth was not kind, and that was something she couldn't ignore. To protect the heart, to protect the forest, she had to confront the reality of the veil, and that meant understanding what lay beyond the surface. Turning away from the broken mirror, Sasha pushed forward through the fog. The dense mist seemed to coil around her as if the veil itself was trying to reclaim her, to pull her deeper into its winding corridors. She couldn't afford to lose focus. There was something more here, something darker waiting to be uncovered. She could feel it in her bones, the pull of ancient forces, the stirring of old powers that had long since been forgotten by the living. The landscape around her continued to shift as she moved deeper into the heart of the veil. The trees here, if they could even be called trees, were twisted beyond recognition. Their branches arced like the arms of some dark deity, reaching for the sky with grotesque, skeletal hands. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a damp, musty staleness that made her stomach churn. But it was the silence that unsettled her most. The forest had always been alive with sound. Rain on leaves, the crackle of a campfire, the wind in the trees. Even in the veil, she had expected some semblance of noise, whispers perhaps, or the rustle of unseen creatures. But here, in this deeper realm, there was nothing. A suffocating stillness that felt almost suffocating, as if the very air was holding its breath. Then she felt it, a shift in the atmosphere, subtle but undeniable. Her skin prickled, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The presence was there again, just beyond her perception. It was the creature, or perhaps creatures she had felt earlier, the ones that slipped between worlds, drawn to the pulse of the heart. But this time she wasn't alone. They were closing in, their dark forms moving in and out of the fog, barely visible but undeniably real. Sasha's breath caught in her throat as the shapes began to solidify, their twisted silhouettes forming in the fog. The creatures emerged slowly, their features indistinct, but their presence was unmistakable. They were made of shadows, dark, malleable shapes that bent and twisted unnaturally, as if their very form was in a state of constant flux. They moved silently, their eyes glowing faintly, like embers in the dark. The creatures circled her, and for a moment, Sasha wondered if they had been drawn to the breaking of the mirror, to the raw energy she had unleashed when confronting her reflection. One of the creatures, a tall, hunched figure with glowing eyes like molten amber, stepped forward. It was covered in thick, dark fur, its limbs long and impossibly thin, bending at odd angles. Its mouth opened, but instead of speaking, a low, guttural growl rumbled from deep within its chest. The air around it seemed to tremble with a dark, malevolent force. The other creatures watched silently, their forms flickering like shadows caught in the wind. They were waiting, watching, as if unsure of what to do next. Sasha took a step back, raising the lantern instinctively. The light flickered and sputtered, as if the creature's presence was sapping its strength, draining it. Her pulse quickened, her mind racing. She didn't know what these things were or why they were drawn to her, but she felt their hunger. They were after something. They had to be. The tall creature's eyes locked onto hers, its gaze unblinking, unrelenting. It stepped closer, moving fluidly, unervingly quiet. Sasha stood her ground, even as her breath caught in her throat. "You've broken the mirror," the creature rasped, its voice low and harsh like a dying wind. The words were not spoken aloud. They were a presence felt deep within her mind. "You have seen the truth, and now you walk the path of us. The ones who dwell between the cracks. The forgotten." Sasha's stomach tightened. The forgotten. She had heard the phrase before, and now it felt as if it were closing in on her, consuming her. She understood now. The veil wasn't just a place where creatures existed. It was a reflection of the things that had been cast aside, things that had been lost to time and memory. And these creatures were the embodiment of that loss. "You," she began, her voice shaky but steadying. "What do you want from me?" The creature tilted its head, its amber eyes glowing brighter, narrowing as it studied her. "What?" It gave a rasping chuckle that sounded like nails scraping against stone. "You have something we need. Something the forest keeps from us." The ground beneath Sasha's feet trembled, as if the veil itself was reacting to the creature's words. The other shadows seemed to move closer, their forms becoming more solid with each passing moment. They were not speaking now. They were listening, waiting, as if the very air between them was charged with an unspoken demand. Sasha's mind raced. The forest keeps something from them. Was it the heart? Was that what they wanted? "What is it?" she demanded, stepping forward with more confidence, her lantern glowing brightly. "What do you want with the heart?" The creature's eyes flickered. There was a pause, a moment of tension before it spoke again. "The heart belongs to us too. It always has. The veil was born from it, and we have been its children, forgotten, bound by its power. You, the chosen, have come to claim it, but there is more to the heart than you know. There is more to the veil than you will ever understand." Sasha's breath caught in her throat. The power of the heart, the connection between the forest, the veil, and herself, was much deeper, much darker than she had realized. The creatures that haunted this space, these forgotten things, were bound to it in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. "We are the ones who remember," the creature hissed, its voice full of longing and anger. "The heart has turned from us, but we will return to claim what was always ours. We are the guardians of the forgotten, and you cannot stop us." The mist around them began to swirl, growing thicker, denser, as if the veil itself was reacting to their words. Sasha felt the weight of the world shifting again, and this time, it wasn't just the veil that was watching her. It was the very fabric of reality, waiting to see what she would do next. She had no more time to question, no more time to wonder. The creatures were closing in, their forms more solid now, their hunger more palpable. The forest and the veil were both pulling her in different directions, each demanding its own claim over her. But she had already made her choice. She raised the lantern high, feeling the pulse of the heart beneath her skin, and with one final breath, she stepped forward into the darkness. The darkness pressed in on Sasha from all sides, thick and suffocating. The creatures, the forgotten things of the veil, were now closer than ever, their forms flickering like fading embers in the fog. The air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration, a heartbeat that reverberated through the ground, through the mist, through her very bones. Sasha could feel the pull of the lantern's light, its warm glow seeming like the only thing left in this twisted world of shadows. She held it high, its faint pulse a lifeline in the suffocating dark, but it was growing dimmer with each passing second. The creatures were moving closer, their eyes glowing brighter, their hunger unmistakable. They wanted the heart. They wanted her. "You cannot run from what you are, Sasha," the creature with amber eyes hissed, its voice now low and insistent, a whisper that seemed to curl into her mind like smoke. "You are the one chosen to bear the heart, but you are also the one who will awaken it. You walk between the worlds, but you are bound to this one. The heart's power will call you, and the veil will take what it is owed." Sasha's hand clenched around the lantern, her grip tightening until her knuckles were white. The words of the creature sank into her thoughts like daggers, twisting and turning, but she couldn't afford to let fear control her. She had made it this far and she couldn't stop now. The veil might pull at her, might want to swallow her whole, but she had a purpose. She had to protect the forest, the heart, and the fragile balance between them. The fog parted before her, and as she moved forward, the creatures scattered, slipping back into the darkness, their forms dissolving like smoke. The land around her began to shift again. The ground trembled beneath her feet as if the very earth was preparing for something monumental. The lantern's light flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the broken, twisted trees. And then she saw it. Through the dark mist, the shape emerged, a vast, ancient structure that loomed like a sentinel in the distance. It was not a building, not in the conventional sense. It was something older, something otherworldly. The structure seemed to pulse with an unnatural light, its jagged spires reaching up into the sky like fingers of obsidian, stretching toward the stars. The air around it crackled with energy, as if the very space was being warped by its presence. Sasha's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the place. The heart was here. She didn't know how she knew it, but the feeling in her chest, the pull, the undeniable pull, told her all she needed to know. The heart of the forest, the power that had been bound to the veil for centuries, lay beyond those walls, deep within the heart of this forgotten place. As she drew closer, the ground beneath her feet began to change. The mist parted, revealing a wide, circular plaza. The air was thick with energy, an unseen force that hummed with a power older than the world itself. The walls of the ancient structure stretched high, covered in strange runes that glowed faintly, pulsing like a living thing. And there, at the center of the plaza, was a massive stone altar, cracked and weathered by the passage of time, but still standing strong. The air around it thrummed with power, vibrating in tune with the pulse in Sasha's chest. The heart was near, she could feel it, beating in time with her own. But it wasn't just the heart that called to her. A shadow flickered at the edges of her vision, and she spun around, her lantern swinging in front of her, its light casting sharp angles across the plaza. The creatures, those dark, twisted things of the veil, were no longer hiding. They were emerging from the mist, stepping into the light, their glowing eyes fixed firmly on her. "The heart belongs to us," the tall creature with amber eyes said, its voice cold and sharp, a hiss that cut through the air. It stepped forward, its long limbs twitching with a hunger Sasha could feel in her bones. The others followed, moving in silence, their forms as fluid as smoke, but their intent unmistakable. They were closing in, their presence heavy, suffocating. Sasha's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. The heart was here. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The creatures would not take it from her. "You cannot have it," Sasha said, her voice steady, but her heart raced. She could feel the power of the heart growing, its energy pressing against her skin, seeping into her very soul. It was a weight, but not one she could easily carry. Not yet. The tall creature with amber eyes paused, its gaze narrowing. "You are still unaware of what it truly is, aren't you? The heart is not a thing to be wielded or guarded. It is not power in the way you think. The heart is life. It is death. It is balance." Sasha's heart thudded in her chest. "What are you saying?" The creature took a step closer, its voice lowering to a whisper. "The veil exists because of the heart. The creatures that walk between worlds are drawn to it. We are bound to it. You cannot protect the heart, Sasha, because you are the one who will awaken its true nature. You are bound to the heart just as we are, and we will take it back." The fog around them thickened, swirling like a storm. The energy in the air grew electric, sparking with intensity. Sasha's mind raced. She could feel it, they were right. The veil, the heart, the creatures, they were all tied together, inseparable, bound by forces older than time itself. The heart wasn't just a source of power, it was the very lifeblood of the balance between worlds. Sasha looked at the creatures, the shadows that circled her, their forms twisting in and out of the fog. They were not here just for power. They were here for the truth, for the balance that she had disrupted. The truth she had yet to fully understand. She stepped closer to the altar, her fingers tingling with the energy that radiated from it. The stones beneath her feet hummed in response, the ground itself shaking as the heart stirred beneath the earth. "You can't take it," Sasha said again, more forcefully this time. "I won't let you." The tall creature stepped forward, its form flickering as if the veil itself were parting before it. "You cannot stop what is already in motion. The veil is alive, Sasha. It will always seek to return to its natural state. You have only delayed what is inevitable." Sasha's heart thundered in her chest. The veil was alive. It had a purpose, a will of its own. She had felt it before, that deep, unsettling sense of the veil's hunger. It wanted balance. It wanted the heart. And Sasha? She was the one who had the power to bring it all crashing down or to protect it. The fog began to swirl faster now, the creatures closing in. The time to act had come. With a breath, Sasha lifted the lantern high, her fingers trembling as she focused on the pulse within the heart. The light from the lantern grew brighter, its warmth seeping into her skin, until the light of the heart and the lantern merged, shining with the intensity of 1,000 suns. The creatures hissed, retreating as the light seared through the fog, cutting through the shadows that tried to consume her. The power of the heart, her power, surged within her, filling her with the strength she needed to face the creatures and the veil itself. "You cannot have it," Sasha said once more, this time with certainty, her voice ringing out as if it were the very heartbeat of the forest. The creatures paused, their eyes flickering, uncertainty creeping into their form. The veil, it seemed, had been waiting for her to take her place. Sasha stepped forward, feeling the weight of the heart's power, the burden of the veil's truth, and the responsibility she now carried. She wasn't just standing between worlds anymore. She was the bridge. The creatures shrank back, their forms dissipating into the fog as the heart's light bathed the entire plaza, banishing the darkness. Sasha was not just a guardian. She was the heart. The light from the lantern flickered, dancing with the energy that Sasha had summoned. It was more than just a glow now. It was an extension of her will, of the heart itself. The creatures of the veil had been forced back, retreating into the mists, but the air was still thick with their presence. They hadn't given up, not by any means. Their hunger for the heart, for the balance, was still there, just beyond the edges of her consciousness. But Sasha wasn't the same person she had been when she first crossed into the veil. She had felt the heart's power stir within her, its pulse aligning with her own. And now, standing in the center of the forgotten plaza, with the heart's energy humming beneath the stones, she could feel it, the shift, the awakening. The veil was alive, yes, but the heart was the true source of power, and Sasha had been chosen to wield it, to awaken it. A deep, resonating thrum filled the air, vibrating through her chest, her bones, her soul. The ground beneath her feet trembled with an ancient force, a power that had lain dormant for so long it was almost impossible to comprehend. She could feel it rising, surging through the stones of the altar, through the fog, through the very air itself. She was no longer just a part of this world, standing between realms. She was the keeper of the veil's pulse, the guardian of the heart. As the light from the lantern grew brighter, Sasha's mind surged with knowledge, visions, fragments of the past, of things long forgotten. She saw the veil in its full form, stretching across the worlds like a tapestry of shadow and light, constantly shifting, ever-changing. She saw the creatures that inhabited it, beings that were born from the forgotten corners of existence, bound to the veil by an unbreakable connection. And at the center of it all, she saw the heart, a beating, pulsing core of energy wrapped in the living flesh of the veil itself. It was the source, the beginning, the end. Everything in the forest, in the realms, was born from it. The creatures, the trees, the very mist, they were all tied to the heart, to its power. But that power came at a cost. The heart wasn't just a force of life, it was a force of balance. It kept the worlds in harmony, tethering them together. But the veil had been fractured, torn open by forces that had long since been forgotten. The heart's energy was no longer contained, and the balance had been lost. The creatures that walked between worlds, the forgotten things, were beginning to seep through, hungry for the heart's power, for its life. And Sasha? She had been chosen to restore that balance, to protect the heart and all that it stood for. But the cost of such power was high. The veil would not let her go easily. The creatures would not stop hunting her, hunting the heart, until they had claimed it for their own. Sasha's breath quickened as the visions swirled around her, the knowledge flooding her senses. She felt the weight of her duty pressing down on her. The veil, the creatures, the heart, it was all connected. She could feel it now in every fiber of her being. The veil was not a place she could simply enter and leave. It was part of her now. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. The heart's power was still too much for her to fully control, to fully understand. The balance had been disturbed, and she needed more time to learn, to harness the heart's energy and guide it back to where it belonged. She couldn't do this alone. The ground shook again, this time more violently, and Sasha stumbled, her lantern sputtering in her hand. The fog around her thickened, swirling like a storm as the creatures reappeared, their eyes glowing with malice. They weren't afraid anymore. They had been driven back, yes, but not defeated. They were growing more desperate, more dangerous. "You cannot stop the inevitable," the tall creature said, its voice a rasp in the air, vibrating in her bones. You think you control the heart, but you are its prisoner. You are bound to the veil as much as we are. Sasha took a step back, her eyes narrowing. She could feel the pull of the creatures, the insidious weight of their hunger. They were closer now, creeping through the fog, their forms shifting in and out of focus. But this time, Sasha wasn't afraid. She was ready. "No," she said firmly, her voice carrying with strength she hadn't known she had. "I am not a prisoner. I will restore the balance. And you will not have the heart." The creatures paused, their forms flickering as if unsure of her resolve. The tall figure took another step forward, its amber eyes burning with intensity. "You are not strong enough to fight this, Sasha. You cannot fight what is already inside you." Sasha's heart raced as the creature's words echoed in her mind. They were right about one thing. She was bound to the heart, bound to the veil in ways she could not yet understand. But that didn't mean she was powerless. The veil had shown her the truth, and now she had to use that knowledge. "I don't need to fight," she said, her voice softening as if speaking to herself as much as to the creatures. "I need to heal." The ground beneath her feet shifted again, the tremors running deeper now, pulsing with the rhythm of the heart. Sasha closed her eyes, focusing on the pulse, the steady beat that had once been so distant, so foreign to her. But now it was a part of her, its rhythm matched her own. She reached out with her mind, letting the energy flow through her like a river, letting the power of the heart connect with her soul. She wasn't just the keeper of the heart. She was the conduit for its healing, the bridge that could restore the balance between the worlds. As she reached deeper into the pulse of the heart, the creatures flinched, their forms shuddering as if they felt the energy surge. The mist around them thickened, swirling, but the light of the lantern, her light, cut through the fog, growing brighter, sharper, like a beacon in the dark. The creatures recoiled, their glowing eyes flickering as the power surged. "You can't control it," the tall creature hissed, its voice strained, filled with panic. "You cannot undo what has been done." But Sasha didn't answer. She was focused, her mind filled with the heartbeat of the heart, with the power of the forest. She felt the veil tremble, the cracks beginning to heal, the balance slowly being restored. The creatures around her began to flicker, their forms growing more translucent, more insubstantial. The fog around her cleared, dissipating as the light from the lantern pushed back the darkness. The heart was healing and the veil was calming. For the first time, Sasha felt the true weight of her role. She wasn't just standing between worlds. She was of the world. The heart, the veil, the creatures, they were all part of her now. And though the creatures of the veil had sought to devour her, she had become its guardian, its healer, its bridge. But that was only the beginning. The heart had awakened. And the veil? It was only just starting to reveal its true depths. The air around Sasha shimmered, the energy swirling with an almost tangible force as the creatures, those dark, forgotten things of the veil, began to fade into the mist. They were still there, their presence a constant weight on her chest, but they were retreating for now, unable to withstand the surge of power she had summoned. The heart, pulsating within her and beneath the earth, was stabilizing the balance. But she knew that this was only a temporary respite. Sasha stood alone in the plaza, the fog still thick around the ancient structure, but the ground beneath her feet no longer trembled with the same ominous force. The creatures were no longer closing in. But that didn't mean the veil had released its grip on her. She could feel the pulse of the heart deep within her chest, its rhythm steady and deep, like the beat of an ancient drum. It echoed in her mind, in her very soul, guiding her, connecting her to the world around her. But the more she focused on it, the more she realized something. There was something deeper beneath the surface of the veil, something buried far below where the light of the heart had reached. A whisper, barely perceptible, like the rustling of dry leaves, brushed across her consciousness. It wasn't the creatures. It was something else. Something ancient. Something forgotten. Sasha stepped forward, her lantern held high, its light flickering as though it, too, was drawn to the force beneath the veil. She could feel it now, pulling at her, tugging at her thoughts, trying to lure her deeper into the fog. The heart was a powerful force, yes, but it wasn't the only force that governed the veil. And there was more to the story than the creatures had let on. Her mind was filled with fragmented images now, visions of the veil's history, of the heart's creation. She saw dark figures standing in a circle, chanting in an ancient tongue, their hands outstretched toward the heart, which pulsed with blinding light. But there was something wrong with the images. The faces of the figures were distorted, their eyes too bright, too hollow. They weren't human. They were something else, something that had existed long before the veil had come into being. Who were they? Sasha thought, her pulse quickening. What happened to them? The ground shifted beneath her again, and Sasha stumbled, barely catching her balance. But this time, the tremor wasn't just the veil reacting to her presence. This was something different, a force that seemed to rise from the earth itself, from the very roots of the forest. The heart pulsed once more, and with it, the air around her seemed to vibrate. A deep, guttural sound rumbled from beneath the earth, a growl, an echo of something ancient that had been buried for far too long. Sasha's breath caught in her throat as the fog parted once again, this time revealing a new, more unsettling figure. It was not a creature in the way the others had been. This was something far more imposing, far more solid. It was a figure made of the same shadow and mist as the creatures, but it was larger, towering even. Its form was indistinct, shifting in and out of focus, but Sasha could feel its weight in the air, could sense the power radiating from it. Its eyes were not glowing like the others. No, these eyes were darker, like endless voids, drawing everything around them in. The figure didn't move as the creatures had, silently or in a blur of motion. It simply stood, staring at her, its presence suffocating in its enormity. Its gaze was cold, unblinking, like it had been watching her since the moment she first entered the veil. "You have awakened what should have remained dormant," a voice whispered, not aloud, but within her mind, filling her thoughts, twisting them. It was deep, resonant, a voice older than time itself. "The heart is stirred, yes, but so have I. The veil has always been more than a boundary. It is a prison." The figure stepped forward, its presence so overpowering that the very ground beneath Sasha's feet seemed to crack. The air around her turned colder, as though the temperature had dropped by degrees in an instant, and a shadow seemed to stretch out from the figure, reaching for her, curling like tendrils of smoke. "Who are you?" Sasha asked, her voice barely a whisper, barely audible over the rising roar of the wind that was now howling through the plaza. Her grip tightened around the lantern. The heart's pulse was still steady, but now, it was becoming more erratic, thrumming faster as if reacting to the figure's presence. The shadowed figure's form seemed to shift and distort, like smoke caught in a windstorm, but it didn't answer immediately. Instead, the figure's presence filled the air, growing heavier and darker by the second. "I am what was left behind. What was cast out." The voice rumbled again, sending a shiver down Sasha's spine. It felt as though it was coming from everywhere at once, from the earth beneath her feet to the fog swirling around them. The veil was not always a boundary. It was a seal. A prison meant to keep me contained. But you have broken the seal. Sasha's blood ran cold. This was something far older than anything she had encountered before, something tied to the very creation of the veil, something that had been locked away. "And now you will see the truth." The figure's voice was no longer a whisper. It was a command, a force that pressed against her, pushing her into the ground. It wasn't just a voice, it was a presence ancient and overwhelming. The fog around Sasha began to churn violently, and the ground cracked open beneath her, revealing what lay beneath the earth. A fissure, long buried, had opened up like a wound in the world itself. From it, something began to rise, something large, something alive. It pulsed with a dark, primal energy, like the heartbeat of the world itself, only twisted, distorted. Sasha stumbled back, her heart hammering in her chest. She could see it now, something massive rising from the darkness. It was as though the earth was birthing it from the depths. The lantern's light flickered wildly, casting long shadows across the ruins. The light from the heart, the only source of warmth and life in this place, began to wane, growing dimmer as the figure moved closer, its enormous shadow swallowing the light. "You are the key to the heart, Sasha, but you are not its master. The veil is mine and so is the heart. You cannot control what you have awakened. You cannot contain me." Sasha's breath caught in her throat. Her thoughts scrambled, her mind racing for answers. What had she done? She had thought the heart was the source of the veil's power, the key to restoring balance. But now, it seemed as though the veil itself was a prison for something much worse than she could have imagined. The creature loomed closer, its presence suffocating, filling the very air with a palpable pressure. Sasha's grip on the lantern was all that held her steady. "And now you must choose, Sasha." The figure's eyes narrowed. "You can fight me or you can join me. The veil will never be the same. Neither will you." The ground continued to shake as the massive form rose further, and Sasha could feel the pulse of the heart quickening within her. She didn't have much time. She could feel the truth now, feel the weight of the choice pressing against her. To fight would mean risking everything, but to join this creature, this thing, meant giving up everything she had fought for. The choice was clear. But the consequences? They were unknown. Sasha's breath came in ragged gasps as the shadowed figure loomed before her, its presence both terrifying and compelling. The ancient being, half-born from the earth's deepest chasms, stood before her as if the very darkness was made manifest. Its form flickered and writhed like smoke caught in a tempest, but Sasha could feel its immense weight, like the pressure of an entire forgotten age bearing down on her. The air itself seemed to warp and twist in its presence, the very fabric of the veil bending under the force of its will. You want me to join you?" Sasha said, her voice trembling, though she did not want to show fear. "To let the veil remain as it is? To become like you?" The shadowed figure's eyes, twin voids of endless blackness, narrowed. "You do not understand." Its voice echoed within her mind like 1,000 whispers in one, a terrifying chorus that made her skin crawl. "The veil is a prison that I have been bound within for centuries. It is not just a boundary between worlds, it is a tomb." The figure's form flickered violently, shifting like liquid shadows, and for a moment, Sasha thought she saw a glimpse of something else. Something monstrous, something more than just a shadow. Its voice rumbled again, and this time, there was a cruel edge to it. "Do you think the creatures of the veil are the only things trapped here? Do you think you are the only one who has been forgotten? The veil is nothing but a scar on the earth. And I am the wound." Sasha's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts racing. The weight of the figure's words pressed down on her. Could it be true? Had the veil, the very force she had come to see as a protective boundary, been something far darker in its origin? Something that had been created to contain this creature? This being? Her mind returned to the visions she had seen. The ancient figures, the ones who had performed the ritual, their hands raised to the heart. She had seen the darkness in their eyes, their hollow faces, the twisted, unnatural forms they took when they reached for the power of the heart. Had they known what they were doing? Had they willingly imprisoned this being? Or had they been deceived into thinking they were protecting the worlds? "I have been waiting for you, Sasha," the creature continued, its voice growing more insistent, more persuasive. "You are the one who has crossed the threshold, who has felt the pulse of the heart, who has awakened its power. And because of that, you are the one who can break the chains. You are the key to the seal." The earth beneath her feet groaned as if the very land was in agony. The fissures that had opened widened, revealing a swirling, inky abyss below, an endless void that seemed to devour the light. The ground trembled violently, and Sasha staggered, her lantern flickering as it fought to stay alight in the oppressive darkness. What do you want from me?" Sasha asked, barely managing to keep her voice steady. "Why did the heart choose me? What is this balance you keep talking about?" The figure loomed closer, its vast shadow enveloping her. Its eyes glinted with ancient malice. "The heart chose you because you are the inheritor of its power. You are not just a keeper of the heart, you are its conduit. You have the ability to reshape the veil, to undo what has been done. You can free us all." Sasha's head spun with the enormity of the revelation. The heart was more than just a source of power, it was a connector, a bridge between realms, and Sasha herself had been chosen to wield it. But to what end? But why? Why would you want to be free? Sasha's voice wavered with the question. "What happens if I release you? What will become of the worlds?" The shadowed figure's form shifted again, a faint ripple of black light running through its outline, as if it was no longer entirely solid. "The worlds are fractured. The veil is the wound between them, and I am the cure. You have no idea what lies beyond the veil, Sasha. You've only seen what you've been shown. The heart is but a fragment of what was lost." A sudden, sharp wind cut through the plaza, howling as it picked up, swirling around them, and Sasha stumbled back. She could feel the energy of the heart pulsing faster now, its rhythm growing more erratic, more unstable. The fog around her began to churn, its tendrils reaching toward her like fingers, pulling at her, whispering secrets in a language she couldn't understand. The veil was never meant to be. It is the scar of creation. The voice of the figure was low, almost reverent now, as if speaking about something deeply personal, something ancient. The heart was torn from the fabric of existence when the veil was cast. Its power was meant to bind the worlds together, not tear them apart. Sasha felt a sudden surge of understanding, a connection to something much older than her, something much deeper than the heart. She could see it now, feel it in her bones. The veil wasn't just a boundary. It wasn't just a space between realms. It was a living, breathing scar, an open wound in the very fabric of reality. The heart had been torn out, and the veil had been created to seal it, to contain it, to keep it from undoing everything. "And if I release you," Sasha began, her voice trembling with the weight of the realization, "if I break the seal, The figure's shadowed form loomed even closer, filling the space with its presence, its voice now a deep, vibrating hum. If you release me, Sasha, the worlds will merge again. The veil will no longer be a prison. It will be a gateway. The boundaries will collapse and everything will return to its natural state. I will be whole again. The heart will be restored to its rightful place, and the worlds will be as they were meant to be. Sasha swallowed hard, trying to process the words. The figure's promise was tempting. A restored world. A world without the veil. But at what cost? What would happen to the delicate balance between the worlds if the boundaries collapsed? What would be left of the realms she had come to know? You have felt it, Sasha. The figure's voice coiled around her, seductive, luring. You know that the heart is not just a protector of balance. It is a force of change, of rebirth. Let me show you what the world could be if the veil was no more. Let me show you the truth beyond the worlds you know. The air around her began to hum with the energy of the heart, its light flickering erratically. The tension in the atmosphere was unbearable, the pull of the shadowed figure's words almost overwhelming. The promise of freedom, of change, of a new reality, echoed in her mind, and for a moment, Sasha felt herself falter, torn between the path she had set for herself and the one the figure was offering. But then, beneath the pull of the figure's words, she felt something else. A soft, steady pulse. The heart's rhythm, steady and true, reminding her of her purpose. Sasha knew in that moment what she had to do. The veil had always been a barrier, a seal, a prison meant to protect the realms from what lay beyond. And while the heart had chosen her to heal that rift, to restore balance, it wasn't for her to decide whether to collapse the boundaries. The heart was not hers to command, and neither was the veil. They were forces far greater than her, forces of nature, of existence itself. Her purpose was to protect that balance, not to destroy it. Sasha stepped back, raising the lantern higher, its light flaring brighter, pushing back the growing darkness. The air crackled with tension, the energy of the heart pulling at her, trying to drag her into its power, into the promise of a new world. No, she said, her voice steady, resolute. I won't free you. I won't let the worlds collapse. The veil is a prison, but it's necessary. The heart must remain protected, and the balance must be restored. The shadowed figure paused, its eyes narrowing into two endless voids. A silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating, before the figure's voice rumbled once more, softer now, but still filled with dark promise. Then you will regret this decision, Sasha. Its words echoed in her mind, a chilling finality to them. The ground beneath Sasha's feet cracked again, and she felt the heart's power flare in response, as if testing her resolve. The creatures of the veil were still lurking, waiting. But Sasha held her ground, the lantern's light bright and unyielding. I won't regret it, she said quietly, the finality in her voice matching the pulse of the heart. With that, the figure's form flickered once more, its shadow dissipating like smoke in the wind. The air cleared and the ground began to settle. The heart's pulse slowed, the fog lifting as the creature vanished into the abyss it had risen from. But Sasha knew this was not over. Sasha stood in the heart of the plaza, the heavy silence pressing in on her like the weight of the world itself. The lantern's light flickered but held steady in her hand, its warmth seeping into her skin, a comforting reminder of the strength she had found within herself. The oppressive atmosphere that had settled over the land began to lift, the energy around her slowly returning to a more familiar, natural rhythm. The figure, the ancient being, was gone, its promises lingering in the air like the echoes of a nightmare. Yet, as the darkness receded, Sasha felt no relief. The balance had been preserved, for now, but the veil still pulsed with an undercurrent of danger. The heart thudded within her chest, its power flickering at the edges of her senses, warning her that there was more at play here than even she could comprehend. The mist swirled gently, no longer a storm of chaos but a quiet, brooding fog that lingered like the remnants of an old memory. The broken altar before her seemed to settle into place, its ancient runes glowing faintly as if acknowledging her choice. She had made a decision, a choice that would not only shape her fate but the fate of the worlds themselves. The creatures of the veil had faded for now, but they were not gone. They would always be a part of this world, tethered to the heart, to the very fabric of existence. Sasha exhaled sharply, her breath visible in the cool air, and she turned toward the forest. The trees stood silent, their gnarled branches swaying in the wind, their leaves trembling as if in response to the shift she had set in motion. She could feel their presence now, more distinctly than ever before, an ancient energy that seemed to hum beneath the soil, beneath the very air she breathed. The forest was alive in ways that were beyond comprehension. its secrets and mysteries far older than she had ever imagined. She had been chosen for this, she realized, not just to guard the heart, but to understand the heart's true nature. The veil was not merely a place between worlds. It was a boundary, a protector of a balance that had been set long before her time. The creatures, the fog, the shadows, they were not merely threats, but manifestations of the conflict that had existed since the very first rift had been torn between the worlds. And the heart, the ancient pulse she had felt within her, was not the force of creation she had believed it to be. It was a reminder of creation, the echo of a power that had once bound the worlds together. But something had changed, something had broken, and now she stood at the edge of that fracture. She wasn't just a guardian. She was the one who would hold the line. She would be the one to protect the heart, to protect the balance between the realms. The wind picked up again, the rustling of the trees in the distance growing louder. Sasha's thoughts were interrupted by a sound, faint but unmistakable, a low eerie hum. She spun around, her lantern raised, the light dancing across the ruins. The hum grew louder, almost musical in its eerie quality, like a chant that came from far below the earth. Then out of the shadows they appeared. The creatures of the veil, no longer flickering or retreating, but emerging from the fog in full force. Their forms were more defined now, more solid, and yet still as unsettling as ever. Their eyes glowed faintly, a ghostly light that reflected the pulse of the heart. They moved in a slow, deliberate rhythm, circling her, their presence heavier than it had ever been. This time, however, they did not advance with the same hunger she had sensed before. They were not simply creatures drawn to the power of the heart. They were something more. One of them, the tall figure with the amber eyes, stepped forward. It seemed to take a different form now, less a shadow, more of a silhouette of something ancient, draped in dark, tattered robes. Its eyes, once wild with hunger, were now sharp with a knowing intensity. It spoke without words, but the meaning was clear in its gaze. "You have done it. You have made your choice." The voice echoed in her mind, the same rasping whisper she had heard before, but now it carried a tone of reverence. "The heart is still here, but you have awoken something else, something that must be understood. You have prevented the veil from collapsing, but the cost of that decision has changed you. You are no longer just the keeper of the heart. You are its partner." Sasha's grip tightened on the lantern, the light flickering once more. "What do you mean?" she demanded. "What is happening?" The creature's eyes glowed brighter, and the air around them began to hum with a low, resonating power. The balance cannot be maintained by force alone. It is fragile, delicate, and the heart is not the only thing that sustains it. There are others, creatures like us, and those who walk the line between realms, bound by the heart's power. You have only seen a fraction of what lies beyond the veil. The fog around them thickened, curling as though it were alive. The ground seemed to pulse beneath Sasha's feet, as if the very earth had taken a deep breath. "The veil is not a prison, not anymore," the creature continued. "It is a transition, a state between life and death, between worlds. And now you have sealed it once again. But it cannot stay this way. You will see more. You will understand more. And when you do, the true purpose of the heart will reveal itself." Sasha's head spun with the words. The creatures were no longer attacking her. They weren't simply enemies to be defeated, they were part of something larger. A force of nature, perhaps, or a part of the world's forgotten history. "You want me to join you, don't you?" Sasha asked, her voice steady despite the flood of confusion and dread that threatened to overwhelm her. "You want me to release the veil, to merge the worlds?" The creature's form flickered, but it remained still. "We have never asked for you to join us, Sasha. But you will, whether you choose it or not. The heart has chosen you. You will become part of it. And through you, the veil will live on." Sasha's mind reeled with the implications. The heart had chosen her, but it hadn't given her any answers. The veil, the heart, the creatures, they were all intertwined, bound by forces beyond her understanding. And now she was the keeper of that balance. The mist around her thickened again, but this time, it didn't feel threatening. It felt familiar. The fog shifted and moved as though it were alive, moving in ways it hadn't before. As the creature with amber eyes stepped back into the shadows, Sasha felt something change within her. Something deep, something that stirred in her chest, in her very bones. The pulse of the heart was not just a beat within her, it was a call, a beckoning to something greater, something otherworldly. "You will learn soon enough, Sasha. The veil will never release you. It is your fate now to walk between worlds, and the creatures that lie beyond the veil will always come." The words echoed in her mind, and the fog parted. The creatures vanished, slipping back into the shadows from which they came. Sasha stood alone once again, but she was not the same. The heart's rhythm still echoed within her, steady and strong, and now the veil was a part of her existence, something that would shape her life, her future. But she knew one thing with certainty: this was only the beginning. The creatures were not gone. The veil was not sealed. And Sasha had only just begun to uncover the truth of the heart, of the worlds beyond, and of her own place within them. The line between them had blurred, and she would soon learn what it meant to walk between them. But for now she would stand guard. She would hold the lantern, the light of the heart, and keep watch over the rift, because she had made her choice. And the veil was not finished with her yet. The silence that followed was more unsettling than the growls, the whispers, the hums that had preceded it. Sasha stood amidst the ruins of the forgotten plaza, the remnants of the ancient altar still towering above her like a jagged scar on the landscape. Her lantern, though flickering weakly, still cast light that cut through the fog, but it no longer felt like a beacon of hope. It felt like a fragile thread, clinging to a world that was slipping from her grasp. The creatures had gone. The shadowed figure with its amber eyes, the beings of the mist, all had faded into the unseen corners of the veil. They were no longer attacking her, no longer trying to devour her, but their words lingered in her mind, heavy with meaning. "The veil will never release you, Sasha." Those words echoed again and again, as if the creature's voice was an indelible mark upon her thoughts. She had chosen to protect the heart, to maintain the balance, but was that truly the right choice? As the fog around her parted, the trees beyond the plaza whispered, their gnarled branches creaking as if they too were listening for something, waiting for the moment when the veil would tear once more. The world felt fragile, as if it were held together by the thinnest thread, and Sasha knew that the heart's pulse, though steady, was not the only force at work here. There were deeper currents, unseen forces, pulling at the fabric of reality. Forces she couldn't begin to comprehend. With the creatures gone, there was nothing left to fight, but that didn't mean she was free. The veil was not a place that would let her go. It was a living thing, a force that would continue to reach for her, to demand her presence, to test her will. She could feel it now, the thrum beneath the ground, the deep vibrations that pulsed in her bones. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for. Maybe she was waiting for the creatures to return, to test her resolve once more. Maybe she was waiting for something worse, something more terrible than anything she had encountered so far. Or maybe, just maybe, she was waiting for the moment when the veil itself would finally crack open, unleashing its true horrors upon the world. Sasha took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. There was no turning back. The creatures of the veil had spoken the truth, in their own twisted way. The heart had chosen her, and she had chosen to protect it. But the price of that choice was becoming clearer with each passing moment. She was bound to this place, to the heart, to the veil. She was part of its delicate balance, whether she liked it or not. The wind shifted, and with it, the fog began to thicken again, curling at her feet like the fingers of the creatures she had faced. She could feel them watching her from the shadows. They weren't gone. They were waiting, lurking just beyond her reach, waiting for her to falter, for the moment when she would doubt her decision. Suddenly, a low, guttural sound broke through the silence, echoing through the trees like the distant growl of some unseen predator. The sound was followed by another, and then another, each one closer than the last. The creatures were returning, but this time they didn't come as individuals. They came as a group, a pack, drawn to the very pulse of the heart, to the energy she carried with her. Sasha's grip on the lantern tightened as she spun around, searching for the source of the sounds. Her eyes strained against the fog, but she saw nothing, only the mist swirling around her, thickening until the world felt suffocating. And then, through the fog, the first creature emerged. It was smaller than the tall, shadowed figure she had faced before, but it was just as terrifying. Its body seemed to ripple with shadow, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. It was a thing of hunger, its teeth sharp and jagged, its movements fluid and predatory. As it stepped forward, Sasha could feel its gaze upon her, feel the weight of its hunger, of its need to feed on whatever power she carried. But she wasn't afraid. Not this time. The creature stopped a few paces away, its body shifting like smoke, its eyes narrowing. Sasha stood her ground, her heart racing, her thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. She didn't know what the creatures wanted now, what they sought from her. But she knew she couldn't let them take the heart's power. Not again. "You have returned," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of her resolve. The creature's lips pulled back in a twisted grin, and its voice was low and rasping, like the sound of dry leaves rustling in a storm. "You cannot hide from us forever, Sasha." Its voice echoed in her mind, a whisper that rattled her bones. "We have seen you. We know what you are now." Sasha's grip on the lantern tightened even more. "What am I then?" she asked, trying to force the uncertainty from her voice. "What do you see?" The creature's grin widened, its eyes gleaming with a twisted understanding. "You are the heart's keeper. But more than that, you are its vessel, its gateway. The balance you protect is not the one you think it is." Sasha's mind reeled. The heart, the pulse that had been with her all this time, had always felt like a burden, a duty, a responsibility. But now she wondered, was it more than that? "The veil is breaking, Sasha," the creature continued, its voice growing darker, deeper. "And you are the reason why. You are the key. But the key must be used." Before Sasha could respond, a second creature appeared, then a third, until they surrounded her, closing in from all sides. The fog thickened with their presence, until it felt like the world itself had disappeared, leaving her alone with the creatures, with the veil, with the ancient force that had been buried for so long. Sasha could feel the pulse of the heart within her chest, and she realized something. The creatures weren't just drawn to the heart's power, they were drawn to her. She wasn't just the keeper. She was the conduit, the bridge between worlds, the one who could open the rift, who could unleash the darkness if she chose to. But she wasn't ready to make that choice. Not yet. "I won't let you control me," she said, her voice steady as she raised the lantern higher. "I will protect the heart. I will protect the veil." The creatures circled her, their eyes narrowing with amusement, as if they could sense the conflict within her. They knew she was torn, between the responsibility she had accepted and the power that now flowed through her. The choice was hers to make, and she could feel the weight of it pressing against her, pulling at her, drawing her closer to the abyss. "You cannot protect something that is already dying," the creature closest to her hissed. "The veil is already crumbling. And you are the one who will bring it down, whether you want to or not." The words sank deep into her mind, planting a seed of doubt. Was it true? Was the veil already beyond saving? Was she doomed to fail, doomed to undo everything she had fought for? The pulse of the heart thrummed louder within her chest, matching the pounding of her heart, echoing in time with the swirling mist, the creatures that circled her, the power that tugged at her very soul. Sasha took a step back, her thoughts a blur. The creatures were right. The veil was not as it seemed, and neither was she. She had been chosen to protect the balance, but that balance was far more fragile than she had ever known. She could feel the truth now, pulsing through the heart, through the very fabric of the veil. She wasn't just the keeper of the heart. She was its breaker. But was that truly her fate? The creatures moved closer, the fog pressing in from all sides. They could feel her hesitation. They could feel her doubt. And soon they would make her choose. The creatures tightened their circle, the fog swirling like a living thing around Sasha, crawling up her legs, curling around her waist, until it seemed to suffocate her every breath. She could feel their eyes on her, those glowing, unblinking orbs of darkness, watching, waiting, anticipating her next move. The tension in the air was unbearable, the weight of the moment pressing in on her, as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for her to make a choice. Sasha could hear the pulse of the heart within her chest, loud and insistent, the rhythm thumping in time with her own heartbeat. It was stronger now, the energy that had once felt like a gift now feeling more like a tether, dragging her toward something she wasn't sure she could control. It was as if the heart itself was reaching out, its power running through her veins, through the very air around her, urging her to make a decision. The creatures inched closer, their forms shifting in and out of focus, their dark shapes blurring in the thick fog, but their eyes remained the same, bright, hungry, knowing. "You felt it, haven't you?" the creature closest to her whispered. Its voice was low and smooth, like the soft rustle of leaves in a storm. "The heart calls to you, Sasha. It has always called. You've always known that the veil, the world, the balance, you are part of it. You've always been part of it." Sasha swallowed hard. Had she always known? There was truth in the creature's words. There was a deep, undeniable connection between her and the heart, something that went beyond the role she had assumed. It wasn't just a responsibility, it was a part of her. The heart had chosen her, yes, but in a way that went far beyond her understanding. She had never questioned it before, never allowed herself to wonder why she was the one who had been drawn to the veil. Why she had been the one to hear the heartbeat of the heart and the whisper of the creatures. Why she had been the one who could step between worlds, who could feel the pulse of the heart as if it were her own. But now, in the thick of this moment, with the creatures closing in and the veil humming with power, Sasha realized that the heart was more than just a protector. It was alive. It was a force that demanded something from her, something that she wasn't sure she was prepared to give. The creatures continued to watch her, their glowing eyes never leaving her face. There was no escape, no room for hesitation, no room for denial. The veil is cracking, Sasha. You can feel it. The voice came from another creature, this one smaller but no less terrifying. It spoke with a kind of bitter amusement. The heart's pulse is growing stronger. The balance you've fought for is already fraying at the edges. The worlds are already bleeding together. And you are the key to either sealing that rift or tearing it open completely. Sasha closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, trying to find her center, but everything felt off. The fog, the creatures, the pulse of the heart inside her, they all blurred together, crashing against her mind like a relentless storm. She didn't know who she was anymore. Was she the keeper of the heart? The protector of the veil? Or was she the one who would destroy it all? For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The creatures paused in their circling as if they could sense her internal conflict. Choose, Sasha. The voice came again, deeper now, more commanding. It was the tall figure with the amber eyes, the one who had first spoken to her, the one who had warned her of the price of her decision. Its form shifted like smoke in the fog, but its eyes never wavered from hers. You are the keeper. You are the vessel. But you are also the breaker. You've known it all along. It was never about protecting the heart. It was always about deciding what to do with it. Sasha's thoughts were spinning. She could feel it, the pull of the creatures, the pull of the heart, the pull of the veil itself. Each one of them was a thread, tugging her in a different direction. She wanted to believe that the heart had chosen her for a reason, that she was meant to protect the balance, to guard the veil from destruction. But was that really the only path? Could the heart, the veil, the creatures, everything be a force for something greater? Could she unlock the power of the heart and reshape the worlds as the creatures had suggested? Was she truly the one meant to break the chains that bound them? Sasha's heart raced faster, the rhythm of the pulse echoing in her chest, faster and faster until it felt as though her entire body was vibrating with the force of it. The creatures closed in, their eyes glowing brighter, their forms more solid, more insistent. And then she heard it, the same soft, insistent whisper from deep within her mind. The pulse of the heart, steady and true, yet laced with something new, something ancient. The whisper of the veil itself. The veil had always been a prison, a barrier meant to hold back the forces beyond, to protect the worlds from something that was too dangerous to exist. But now it was a rift between worlds, between realms, between the light and the dark. The creatures, the heart, the ancient power, everything was part of this fracture. And Sasha, she was the one who would decide whether to mend it or tear it apart. She could feel it now, the weight of the choice pressing against her chest. The path was not clear. There was no easy answer. Her fingers tightened around the lantern, feeling the heat of the heart inside her, the pulse that had been her constant companion. The creatures were waiting, their glowing eyes piercing through the fog. The moment of decision was here. I won't destroy everything, Sasha whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She could feel the words form on her lips even before she had consciously made the decision. I will protect the balance. But as soon as the words left her mouth, the world seemed to shift. The air grew still, the fog pressing in from all sides. The creatures froze, their eyes narrowing. The pulse of the heart began to slow, its rhythm deepening, almost mournful, as if it too was hearing her decision and understanding the consequences of it. The shadowed figure with the amber eyes stepped forward, its massive form looming over her. Its gaze softened, but there was still a flicker of something ancient, something powerful, in its eyes. You cannot undo what has been done, Sasha. The creature's voice was almost a whisper now. The veil is breaking and you have chosen to protect it. But remember this, the veil is not a wall. It is a bridge. And once the rift is opened, there is no going back. Sasha felt a shiver run through her, the weight of those words sinking deep into her soul. The creatures were not gone, they were simply waiting for her to truly understand. The rift was not just a crack in the veil. It was a tear in reality itself. And as the pulse of the heart slowed, Sasha understood. The balance was fragile. The veil was a bridge that connected the realms. A bridge that she had just chosen to guard, to protect, to keep in place. But it was also a bridge that could be crossed, by anyone, if she allowed it. Sasha's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. The creatures had always known this, had always understood the true nature of the heart, of the veil. And now it was up to her to hold the line. But she also knew, deep in her bones, that the veil would not stay silent for long. The creatures would return. And the rift, was waiting. Sasha stood at the edge of the plaza, the weight of her decision settling over her like a heavy cloak. The creatures were gone, vanished back into the mist from which they had come, but their presence lingered, a shadow hanging in the air. The fog swirled around her feet, and she could feel it pressing against her skin, as though it were alive, aware of her every thought, every move. The pulse of the heart continued to echo within her, steady and unyielding, a constant reminder of the power she now wielded, the choice she had made. The heart was hers to protect, hers to guard, but the price of that protection was becoming clearer by the second. She could feel the veil stretching, the rift between worlds widening ever so slightly, and the pull of the creatures, of the darkness, was stronger than ever. She had chosen to protect the balance, to keep the veil intact, but at what cost? Could she truly keep it from unraveling, or was she simply delaying the inevitable? Sasha's eyes scanned the fog-choked landscape around her. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out toward her, the very air thick with the scent of decay. The fog seemed to breathe with her, as if it were waiting for something, anticipating her next move. She couldn't shake the feeling that the creatures were still watching her, waiting for the moment when she would falter, when the weight of her decision would become too much to bear. The wind picked up again, howling through the trees, its eerie whistle mingling with the distant calls of the creatures, the whispers of the veil. Sasha's hand tightened around the lantern, the warmth of the heart radiating from within. The light flickered wildly, as though responding to the increasing tension in the air, its glow casting long, trembling shadows across the broken altar. She felt the power of the heart surge within her once more, and for the briefest of moments she could feel the connection between the worlds, the pulse of life and death, of creation and destruction, all flowing through her. But there was something else. A deep, nagging pull at the back of her mind. A feeling that the creatures hadn't been entirely wrong. She wasn't just the keeper of the heart. She wasn't just guarding the balance. She was its vessel. The realization hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. The veil wasn't just a boundary between worlds. It was a living thing, a delicate web holding everything together. And she was tied to it in a way she hadn't fully understood before. The heart had chosen her because of her unique connection to the veil. But now, as she stood at the crossroads of fate, she realized that she was more than just a protector. She was the point of intersection, the place where the balance could be either mended or torn apart. The creatures had known this all along. They had sensed it in her, felt the power of the heart coursing through her veins. They had been waiting for her to make this choice, waiting for her to decide whether she would keep the veil intact or let it fall. And now she could feel it. The rift was widening, stretching, pulling at the very fabric of reality. She had felt the heart's pulse slow, its rhythm fading to a deep, mournful beat, and with it she could sense the beginning of something new, something darker. The creatures had spoken of change, of a world reborn, of the heart's power reshaping the realms. But was that what she wanted? Was that what was meant to happen? Could she truly allow the veil to collapse, to merge the worlds into one chaotic, unrecognizable whole? A distant rumble of thunder echoed through the trees, the sky above darkening, as though the very heavens themselves were reacting to the tension in the air. The wind picked up again, this time carrying with it the scent of something foul, something ancient, something forgotten. The fog swirled more violently, and the ground beneath her feet trembled, as though the earth itself was alive, reacting to her presence, to her decision. Sasha turned, her eyes scanning the horizon. The creatures had returned, though not in the same form as before. They no longer moved through the fog as shadows. Now they were more solid, more real, their figures taking shape in the distance. She could see their outlines, tall, twisted forms that seemed to flicker between the worlds, caught between shadow and light. Their eyes glowed brighter than ever, piercing through the mist like beacons, and their presence was oppressive, suffocating. They were waiting for her to act. The largest of them, the one with the amber eyes, stepped forward. Its form flickered with an eerie, fluid motion, and as it moved, the ground seemed to pulse beneath its feet, as if the very land was bending to its will. Sasha could feel its presence before it even spoke, the weight of its gaze heavy and undeniable. "You have chosen, Sasha," the creature said, its voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "But it is not enough. You cannot simply protect the veil. You cannot simply guard the heart. You must decide what it will become, what the worlds will become." Sasha felt the ground beneath her shift, the rift widening, and she could feel the pressure of the veil, the force of the boundary between realms, crack and strain against her. It was waiting like a coiled spring ready to snap. "I've chosen to protect the balance," Sasha replied, her voice trembling but determined. I will not let the worlds merge. The creature's eyes narrowed, its gaze piercing through her, as though it were looking into her very soul. You cannot fight what has already begun, Sasha. The rift is already here. The heart is already awake. You cannot close the gate once it has been opened. Sasha's heart pounded in her chest, her grip tightening on the lantern as the creature's words struck home. Was it true? Could she really stop it? Could she really keep the world separate, hold the veil together when it had already begun to tear apart? The fog swirled around her, thick and suffocating, and for a moment she was plunged into darkness. The pulse of the heart surged again, this time louder, more forceful, filling her ears, her mind, her very being. It was as if the heart itself was calling to her, pulling at her, urging her to make the final choice. Could she resist the temptation to let it all fall? Could she truly maintain the balance, knowing the cost? She glanced toward the creatures, their eyes gleaming with hunger, with impatience. They were no longer just shadows. They were beings of power, tied to the heart and to the veil, their very existence intertwined with the fate of the realms. They were waiting for her to unlock the gate, to release them from their prison. Sasha took a deep breath, summoning the strength she had carried within her all this time. The lantern flickered, its light dancing wildly, and for the briefest of moments she felt a surge of clarity. She wasn't just a keeper. She wasn't just a vessel. She was the one who could shape the future. She could choose what happened next. And in that moment the choice became clear. Sasha raised the lantern high, its light growing brighter, more focused, until it illuminated the fog and the creatures in front of her. She could feel the pulse of the heart building again, the power surging through her, but this time she controlled it. This time she would not let it take over. This time she would not let the rift swallow her or the worlds. The fog began to recede, the creatures faltering as the light pushed back against them. But Sasha knew it wasn't enough. The balance would need to be more than just the heart and the lantern. It would need her resolve. She would have to be the one to hold the line, to decide. And no matter what, she would protect the veil. She would protect the world, no matter the cost. The lantern's glow intensified, its light cutting through the fog like a blade, pushing back the darkness that had swarmed around her. The pulse of the heart throbbed within her chest, each beat more powerful, more insistent than the last, as if the heart itself was reacting to her defiance. Sasha could feel it now, the weight of the choice, the gravity of the moment pressing down on her. The creatures were still there, their forms flickering at the edges of her vision, but the light of the lantern was keeping them at bay, their glowing eyes watching her with an almost predatory intensity. The ground beneath her feet trembled again, the rift expanding ever so slightly, like a fissure slowly widening, threatening to break open completely. Sasha's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the balance slipping. It wasn't just the heart that was at stake anymore. It was the very fabric of existence, the boundary between the worlds. Everything she had fought for, the veil, the heart, the power that connected them all, was now in her hands. You cannot keep the worlds apart forever, Sasha, the creature with amber eyes spoke again, its voice cold and distant, yet full of quiet menace. The heart will tear the veil apart if you continue to resist. The worlds are meant to merge. This is the way it was always going to be. Sasha shook her head, her voice steady but firm as she spoke, even though the weight of the creature's words pressed against her like a physical force. I won't let the veil fall. I won't let the worlds collide. The creature took a step forward, its form shimmering in the mist. You already have. The words hit her like a wave crashing against jagged rocks. Sasha's heart raced, but her resolve didn't waver. The pulse of the heart within her continued to beat, steady and relentless, like the ticking of a clock counting down to the moment of reckoning. The creatures were right in one regard. The rift had already begun. She had felt it herself. But it was not too late. The veil, though strained, was still intact. She could feel it, the very fibers of it stretching across reality, trembling but holding strong. The light of the lantern flared once more, and she stepped forward, facing the largest of the creatures with amber eyes. I won't merge the worlds, she said, each word burning with a determination she didn't even fully understand. I will hold the line. I will protect the heart, and I will protect the veil. The creature's form flickered and wavered in the mist, its eyes flashing with something almost like frustration. You cannot hold the line forever, Sasha. The veil was never meant to endure. The heart, and the creatures bound to it, will tear it apart, whether you are ready or not. Sasha's hand tightened around the lantern, the warmth of its light seeping into her skin, grounding her. She could feel the power of the heart pulsing stronger now, responding to her will, to her choice. The very air seemed to vibrate with it, humming like a live wire, the veil stretching taut, holding on by the barest thread. She could feel the creatures closing in again, their forms growing sharper, their presence more imposing. But this time Sasha was not afraid. The fear that had gripped her since her first encounter with them, the doubt that had crept into her heart, was fading, replaced by something stronger, an unshakable certainty. Her breath slowed, and she closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the beat of the heart inside her, on the pulse of the veil. In that quiet space she felt something shift, something deep within her. The heart was not just a source of power, it was a part of her. The veil was not just a boundary, it was her connection to everything that had come before, everything that was yet to come. She was not just its keeper, its protector, she was its anchor. She opened her eyes, and the creatures hesitated. The mist around them began to shift, swirling in on itself, as if reacting to her inner transformation. The ground trembled once more, but this time it was different. The earth beneath her feet seemed to steady, the rift that had been threatening to tear the world apart now feeling like a distant hum, not quite as urgent, not quite as insistent. She raised the lantern high once again, and the light burned brighter than ever before, its radiance pushing the creatures back, pushing the mist away, carving a path through the fog. The heartbeat that had echoed in her chest was now in sync with the pulse of the veil, the rhythm of existence itself. She could feel it, the balance was shifting, but not in the way the creatures had wanted. "The veil is not a prison," Sasha said, her voice ringing out across the plaza, strong and unwavering. "It is a bridge, yes, but it is also a wall, a boundary, and it will hold." The creatures shrank back, their forms flickering, uncertainty in their movements. The amber-eyed creature snarled, its mouth pulling back into a snarl, the amber light of its gaze flickering with something dark and malevolent. "You cannot defy the heart, Sasha. The power of the veil, the heart, is too great for you to control. You will not keep it from collapsing forever. It will tear apart the worlds, and you will be powerless to stop it." Sasha felt the weight of the creature's words, but she did not waver. She had felt the power of the heart, felt it stir within her. She knew now that it wasn't about controlling the heart or about controlling the veil. It was about understanding them, about accepting the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. The veil was not just a barrier between worlds, it was a connection. The heart was not just a force of destruction, it was a force of creation. Together they had shaped the balance, but it was up to her to keep it intact. She took another step forward, her eyes locked with the amber-eyed creature. "The heart may be a force of creation," she said softly, "but it is also a force of choice. And my choice is to protect the balance, to protect the veil, to keep the world separate for as long as I can." The creature's amber eyes flashed with a final flare of light, and it stepped back into the mist, its form dissolving into the fog like smoke. The other creatures followed, fading into the distance, their eyes still watching her, but now with a sense of reluctant acceptance. For a moment, everything was still. The fog, the mist, the creatures, they were all gone as if they had never been there. The pulse of the heart slowed, its rhythm settling into a steady, calming beat. The rift that had once threatened to tear the world apart was still there, but it was no longer as urgent, no longer as powerful. The veil had held. Sasha exhaled, her breath a soft cloud in the cool air. Her hand remained tightly around the lantern, but its light had softened now, no longer a beacon of resistance but a symbol of the choice she had made. She had protected the veil. She had held the line. For now at least. But she knew the creatures would return. She knew the rift would grow, and the heart's pulse would continue to beat, steady and unyielding. The battle was far from over. But Sasha was ready. She had made her choice. She would protect the balance. She would protect the veil, no matter what. And when the time came for the final reckoning, she would be ready to face it, head on.